Chapter 54. In the unfamiliar room, it was so dark that she could not even see her own fingers. Jinwan subconsciously raised her head and kissed him. The moment she kissed him, she could not pull away. Her hands circled around his neck in a death grip. The room door was slammed shut with a pang. The lights were not turned on yet. Jinwan's urgent kiss gradually moved downwards, landing on his Adam's apple. The man who had always been able to control himself gave a muffled groan. Her chin was abruptly pinched by him. His low and hoarse voice landed by her ears. "You want it?" Jinwan had completely lost her rationality as she nodded in his arms. In order to prove that she was really in a hurry, her hands randomly tugged at the expensive buttons on his shirt. When she could not pull them off, she opened her mouth and bit down hard. In the darkness, Mo Jingshan abruptly carried her in. Even though it was pitch black, he was still able to accurately find the direction of the bedroom. Jinwan was so anxious that she could no longer differentiate between north, south, east, and west. The man's unique cold fragrance floated on her face. All of her senses were concentrated, and there were only two words in her mind. Sleep with him. Sleep with him. Sleep with him. Jinwan's arms remained tightly wrapped around his neck. Her coat had long fallen to the ground when she entered. Her messy dress was thrown into the air and slowly fell to the ground. "See," Jinwan suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air. The man abruptly stood up, and the bedside lamp in the bedroom was instantly turned on. The warm light shone on the two of them. The light was not blinding, and Jinwan only felt the pain in her hand for a moment. She did not want to stop all of this. She struggled to sit up and tugged at his clothes. Don't stop." However, the moment her hand reached out, it was caught by him. Mo Jingshan glanced at her flushed and impatient expression. He held her hand and lowered his eyes to look at the two faint wounds on her palm and fingers. Earlier, when she was holding the fruit knife and the wine bottle, she had accidentally cut her own hand. The brightest light in the bedroom was suddenly turned on. Jinwan instinctively narrowed her eyes. She blankly watched as the man's figure walked out in front of her. Left? Just like that? She panicked. The environment here was unfamiliar, and she was currently in a daze. She did not have much sense of security. In a panic, she stumbled up from the bed and staggered to the bedroom door, only to see Mo Jingshan come back with something that looked like a medicine box. Jinwan's gaze was slightly dazed as she stared at the medicine box in his hands. She was not wearing any clothes. She stood there as though she was completely unaware. Mo Jingshan's throat moved as he watched. He said hoarsely, "Go back and sit properly." Jinwan Mo Jingshan's eyes widened as he grabbed onto the door and threw her back onto the bed. He forcefully held onto her hands. And Mo. G was not. G said, emoji, he. He used iodophor to disinfect her hands. Jinwan did not recognize the other powder in his hands. She was dazed. Jinwan could barely make out the words Nan Bai Yao. Looking at the well-dressed man who was applying medicine on her hand, Jinwan's expression that was about to cry changed and she suddenly grinned. "What are you laughing at?" Mo Jingshan asked calmly when he saw that she was no different from being drunk after being drugged. "Hubby," Jinwan tilted her head. While he was applying the bandage, she stretched out her little feet toward his leg. Her toes moved back and forth on his leg. Mo Jingshan's expression did not change. His hands continued to steadily and orderly apply the bandage. "Don't move." She heard the man's low and heavy voice carry a hint of warning. Jinwan refused to listen. In her previous life, she did not have a chance to have a good time with him. This life had just begun. Since they had already come this far, there was nothing to be shy about. That day on the street, she had thought in her heart that in this life, she wanted to give birth to Mo Jingshan's children, give birth to many children. Her heart was in a mess, and the movements of her feet became more and more excessive. She even looked at him with coquettish eyes and giggles. "Don't mess around. Hubby, be more obedient." Hubby, Jinwan, whose rationality had been completely used up, used all her skills. She raised her little feet and climbed up his abdomen. Chapter 55. It seemed like she had never seen him completely naked, but just from this touch she knew that Mo Jingshan was definitely a top quality. At the thought that this man was hers and only hers, she was even more excited and wanted to entangle him with her hands and feet. "Put your hands down." It was as though Mo Jingshan was instructing a primary school student. He sternly took the medicine box away from her hand to prevent her from knocking it over. He had just moved the medicine box to the bedside table when Jin Wan unsteadily got off the bed and pounced toward him. She hugged him from behind and rubbed her hot little face against his back. Her voice carried a hint of anxiousness as she sobbed. She suddenly reached out and pushed away the medicine box he was pressing on the table. She squeezed in front of him and bit the collar of his shirt fiercely. She wrapped her arms and legs around him and kissed his chin. In the next moment, Jin Wan was abruptly thrown onto the bed by the man. Before she could react, she heard Mo Jingshan speak hoarsely by her ear, "Little vixen." As soon as he finished speaking, he heard the sound of a belt falling to the ground. Women's skirts, men's trousers, shirts, all scattered on the ground mixed together. The man covered her body, his eyes dark and scorching. The touch of the scorching palm made her whole body go limp. Her eyes were filled with tears. She was moved and trembling. Mo Jingshan let out a low chuckle from his chest. Just as she was about to ask him what he was laughing at, the man suddenly, without any hesitation, crashed into her. Jin Wan's two hands clung onto his shoulders. For a moment she was unable to get used to it. She moaned weakly, and her voice was like a cat's meow. It was soft and gentle, and her hoarse voice undoubtedly hooked the man's nerves. Jin Wan was woken up with a start in the morning. The sky had been bright for a long time and she abruptly opened her eyes. In an unfamiliar room with a bright window, she slowly sat up, glancing at the man's light gray shirt she was wearing. She could still smell Mo Jingshan's clear scent in the air. Although this was not the Yew Garden, she vaguely remembered that last night, Mo Jingshan had carried her to the bathroom to take a shower. Because there were no women's clothes here, he gave her a shirt. The sleeves of the shirt were very long, covering the back of his hand, and only the tips of his fingers could be seen. This shirt size belonged to Mo Jingshan. Everything that had happened last night replayed in her mind. From the bedroom to the living room, from the bed to the sofa, to the bathroom and finally back to the bed. In the end, she went from being pestered at the very beginning to being completely controlled by him, unable to control herself. She could not imagine how long her weak resistance would have lasted if Mo Jingshan had not arrived in time. "You're awake." The man's clear and melodious voice suddenly sounded in front of the door. Jin Wan raised her eyes with a jerk, only to see Mo Jingshan's figure flash by the door, and then it was still his voice outside. "Get up for breakfast." She stayed in bed for a long time before she came back to her senses. She didn't have time to ask more questions, so she quickly got out of bed. Jin Wan found the bathroom in the bedroom. After a simple wash, she came out wearing the shirt that covered half her thighs. The aroma of food wafted in the dining room adjacent to the living room, but Jin Wan looked out through the huge floor-to-ceiling window in the living room. This place seemed to be very close to the Mo Corporation. The bustling city center was in front of her, but due to the height she could not hear any noise. Downstairs was a large green garden, and the asphalt road was also very neat and tidy. It was obvious that this was a very high-class apartment district. This was Mo Jingshan's residence near the company before he got married? After she got married, she had always stayed in the Yew Garden because that was their matrimonial home. In the past, she did not understand Mo Jingshan well enough, so she did not even know of this place's existence. Turning around, Jin Wan's attention was once again attracted by the style of the room. This place was not as luxurious as the Yew Garden. The Yew Garden was a residence set by the Mo family's elders. Back then she did not participate in the renovation. Since it was comfortable she did not care too much. But here it was clean and simple, similar to Mo Jingshan's own low-profile style. However, the color of the entire house was slightly cold. The aroma from the dining room added some liveliness to the cold colors. "Don't stand there in a daze. Come over, eat something." Jin Wan turned toward the dining room, stopping by the dining table. Looking at the simple yet nutritious breakfast on the table, Jin Wan scanned the surroundings. This breakfast did not look like takeaway, and there did not seem to be any servants or nannies around. Could it be that this breakfast? You made it? She looked at the man inside in astonishment. Mo Jingshan had already returned to his prim and proper appearance. However, when he helped her bring out the bowls and chopsticks, there was a hint of human nature to him. When he walked over, the French buttons on his shirt were illuminated by the sunlight from the window, revealing a bright blue light. Could it be that you sleepwalked into the kitchen to make it? Mo Jingshan placed the cutlery on the table in front of her. This, Mo Jingshan personally made breakfast? Jin Wan felt that she was about to find a hole to hide in. Her understanding of him was really just a little. Was there anything in this world that he did not know how to do? She did not eat much last night, and her stomach was currently not feeling well. Jin Wan quietly sat by the dining table. Just by smelling the aroma, she knew that it would definitely be delicious. She could not help but sigh. "Did you call me yesterday as soon as you got off the plane?" Jinwan recalled the call he had made yesterday when Qinjun was about to explode. Mo Jingshan furrowed his brows. He did not answer but instead asked, "That dinner party, who gave you the invitation?" Han Tianyuan. He did not speak further. Based on his abilities, it would be easy for him to find out the entire story. After all, Jinwan had just transferred Han Tianyuan's 2 companies into her hands. It was impossible for Mo Jingshan to not know about this. She wanted to grow wings and fly away, and he did not stop her. This kind of respect and indulgence, Jinwan felt satisfied in her heart. But what happened last night? Thankfully he had rushed over. "Did you go to the 10th floor of the hotel last night?" At that time, Zhou Yanyan wanted to push me into that room. In the end, I was the one who pushed her in. Jinwan took a bite of the golden fried egg that was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. She softly asked, "How is she?" Mo Jingshan's voice was cold. "Half dead. From today onwards, you probably won't have the chance to see her again. I'll handle it." Jinwan gazed at the handsome face in front of her. Originally, she wanted to ask more about what happened yesterday, but it was clear that Mo Jingshan did not plan on leaving a shadow in her heart. Thankfully, nothing irreversible happened. From his cold tone, it seemed like the Han and Zhou families would not be able to escape from this calamity. Jinwan was not a saint. If others treated her unkindly and unjustly, she would definitely not sit and wait for death. With her husband supporting her, this feeling was truly indescribably blissful. However, when she was showering earlier, she saw the marks he left on her body. Jinwan took another bite of the fried egg, but her expression was more or less uncomfortable. She could still recall everything from last night. In her entire life she had never imagined that she would become like that. Chapter 56. Early in the morning, Boss Missouri served her so blissfully. Jinwan wore his shirt as she paced around the room. In the end, she could not help but ask, "Is this your place?" His simple words confirmed Jinwan's suspicions. Mo Jingshan rarely returned to the Mo family's old residence, so this was indeed his usual place. Jinwan wore Mo Jingshan's shirt. The lower half of the shirt was completely bare. She returned to the bedroom and caught a glimpse of the clothes on the floor. The dress she wore yesterday was already torn. It easily reminded her of last night's indulgence. Her underwear were not washed either. They were messily left on the floor for an entire night. It was impossible for her to wear them again. "Don't you have any clothes I can wear here?" She went out again and saw Mo Jingshan wiping his hands as he walked out of the kitchen. A CEO boss who knew how to cook and wash dishes was really rare. "Do you really hope to see women's clothes here?" he asked in return. "It's been a long time since I've returned here. I called the supermarket downstairs to deliver the ingredients in the morning. There are only a few sets of clothes in the closet," he said mildly. "But I can't always stay here and dress like this. It's fine if I'm only in front of you, but I can't wear this out." Mo Jingshan's gaze suddenly darkened. "You can only dress like this in front of me. If you dare to wear it out for others to see, why don't you try?" Jinwan's expression was awkward. "Then what should I wear today? Wouldn't it be too troublesome to call Auntie Chen to send clothes over?" "Wait." Mo Jingshan spoke and picked up the phone. Jinwan took the opportunity to walk around the house while he was on the phone. Although this place was not as big as the Yu Gardens villa, nor was it a duplex apartment, it was still around 150 square meters. The bedroom, living room, dining room, and study were all available. It was just that it was too simple and there were very few things. She opened the closet and saw that it was indeed filled with men's shirts and trousers. Even the indoor slippers in the shoe cabinet by the door were brand new and unopened. They were purely for men. It could be seen that aside from himself, no one else had ever lived in this place. It was even more impossible for a woman to be here. Even though she knew that Mo Jingshan was a man of integrity, after looking around, Jinwan still satisfied her little desire as a woman. Although she couldn't wear her previous clothes today, she couldn't just throw them away. Jinwan was no longer as extravagant as she used to be. Right now she was both a clean freak and a thrifty housekeeper. Besides, the price of the underwear was not cheap. She picked up the pitiful underwear on the ground and returned to the bathroom. The sound of running water could be heard in the bathroom. Mo Jingshan dialed a number. After the call connected, he calmly said, "Prepare a set of clothes that Jinwan can wear and send it over. The address is Aolan International 1801. "You actually went back there? You even brought Jinwan to stay there?" If you don't know the size, go to the U Garden and bring Auntie Chen with you. The man on the other end of the line. Are you sure it's AO Lan International? That's where you? I'll deliver it within half an hour. What? The sound of the call being hung up could be heard from the other end of the line, leaving only a cold beeping sound. Mo Jingshin casually tossed his phone onto the coffee table. Hearing the sound of running water in the bathroom, he walked in and saw that the G family's young miss, who used to not have to do any chores, was currently happily washing the white underwear and the same style underwear in her hands. She even tidied up the bed. There was nothing extra on the floor. Not only had her temperament changed greatly, even her habits had changed significantly. Jinwan was washing seriously in the bathroom. Occasionally she would move her wet hands behind her ears and push her hair back, revealing her snow-white neck. The loose shirt on her body was seductive and unguarded against him. Mo Jingshin stood there and watched for a long time. Half an hour later the doorbell rang. Mo Jingshin turned to open the door. Auntie Chen had already been brought over. After entering the door, she did not ask anything and directly brought in the clothes she had found for Jinwan. Madam, your clothes are here. They were all found in your closet. I don't know if the size is right, but I think they're what you often wear. Auntie Chen went inside to look for Jinwan. A tall and slender man stood by the door with one hand in his trouser pocket. When he saw Mo Jingshin, it was as though this place was his and Jinwan's wedding room. The man narrowed his eyes and did not enter. He lit a cigarette. A few days ago I heard Qin Siding mention this. I thought I had heard wrongly. Are you serious with Jinwan? Mo Jingshin's tone was extremely mild. Who gave you the guts to smoke in my place? You've King quit smoking for several years. I haven't. The man almost choked on the smoke. His handsome face was cold and expressionless. When he saw the ambiguous marks on Mo Jingshin's shirt collar, his lips curved seductively and coldly. I thought you'd been so abstinent in the past few years that you wouldn't be interested in any woman. She's not just any woman. What on earth is this Jinwan capable enough to attract your attention? She's very good. She does have the ability. Mr. Mo, I've delivered Madam's clothes. Do you have any other orders? Auntie Chen quickly came out. The man outside the door raised his eyebrows and looked in, but did not see Jinwan coming out of the bedroom. Go back. Mo Jingshin was cold. All right, Mr. Mo. Mo Jingshin neatly closed the door, leaving the two of them outside. Jinwan changed her clothes in the room. Auntie Chen was very careful. The clothes she brought were all the right sizes. Whether it was the underwear or the outerwear, they were all simple and generous styles that she liked recently. She tidied up her clothes and combed her hair. Her slightly wavy hair scattered down her back. She relied on her good skin and rarely put on makeup. Right now she did not even apply any toner and walked out barefaced. Mo Jingshin stood there, facing the floor-to-ceiling window. He was tall and straight, his aura cold and stern. His shirt and trousers were not creased at all, and he had one hand in his pocket. Strangely, Jinwan could see an elegant and independent aura from his back view. I've changed. She walked over. The man turned back to look at her. You didn't bring your phone back? No, I just received your call yesterday. Zhou Yinyan snatched it away and threw it on the ground. It shouldn't be usable anymore. The moment her words landed, Mo Jingshin turned around and picked up the electronic car keys on the coffee table. Go put on your coat. Ah? Where are you going? Chapter 57. Hearing this, Jinwan quickly returned to the bedroom to pick up the coat Auntie Chen had brought. She put it on and quickly followed him out. Walking through the green garden downstairs, Jinwan carefully looked at the surroundings. Although this place is in the center of the city, the environment is really good. It doesn't feel as impulsive. In the future, if we don't return to the U Garden, it's not bad to stay here. Furthermore, if they stayed here alone, they could enjoy the world of the two of them. Although the helpers in the U Garden knew when to advance and retreat and would not disturb them, there were still people at home. It was slightly different from this small world of the two of them. For example, they could see the great CEO Mo washing his hands and making soup here. If they were in the Mo family or the U Garden, the helpers would most likely explode. After all, they were afraid that they would lose their jobs because Mo Jingshin's cooking skills were not inferior to theirs. It was extremely delicious. As the saying goes, a true person does not reveal his true colors. Using this to describe Mo Jingshin was truly not an exaggeration. Although Jinwan did not say these words, Mo Jingshin could hear her meaning. He glanced at her. If you like it, come and stay. The password is your birthday. My birthday? Jinwan faltered. Surprise flashed across her eyes, but she did not reveal it. If this was the place he usually stayed before marriage, it was impossible for her birthday to be the password. I changed the password this morning, without waiting for her to ask, Mo Jingshan calmly stated. Jinwan silently smiled. Her heart was extremely satisfied. The man was tall and had long legs. Jinwan quickly followed behind him. She raised her hand to hold his arm, but the moment she raised it, it was caught in his palm. The people who passed by in the community downstairs all looked in their direction with envy. The man was tall and handsome, and the woman was beautiful and amiable with a sweet smile. It was really rare to see two people who were so compatible with each other. In the past, they didn't know that there was such a pair of enviable young lovers here. Jinwan was only 20 years old. She was very young. Although the way she dressed was elegant, her eyes were big and her skin was soft. She was often mistaken for 17 or 18 years old. No one would have guessed that this young couple had already been married for half a year. After boarding the car, Jinwan sat in the front passenger seat. As she fastened her seatbelt, she asked, "In the past, you only stayed here occasionally, right? I saw that the neighbors who passed by earlier were very unfamiliar with you." "Most of the time, I still live in the company. Indeed, I only come here a few times." "No wonder." Jinwan took a look at the time and said, "You just came back yesterday and this time, you went to England to discuss a project. As soon as you came back, you've been busy with my affairs. Don't you need to go to the company? With Shenmu and the executives of other companies around, the company won't be unable to operate without me. I'll take some time in the afternoon to take a look." "It's fine." Mo Jingshan drove the car out of Aolan International. It wasn't cold today. Jinwan turned to look at the man who was focused on driving. Today, Mo Jingshan did not wear a suit. Instead, he wore a casual and sporty outfit. It was rare for him to have a homey vibe. He did not have the noble, aloof, and unapproachable aura of an upper-class elite. He was wearing a long, dark trench coat, which together with Jinwan's white coat, looked like a black and white couple's outfit. Usually, regardless of whether it was his suit or shirt, Mo Jingshan's outfit was always colder. However, as the autumn sun shone in through the car window, it gave him a rare sense of approachable warmth. Jinwan originally wanted to speak, but when she turned to look at Mo Jingshan, her mind suddenly flashed back to last night. After he drove her away, she, in the car, did all sorts of things to him. She rubbed her forehead and turned to press her face against the car window to lower the temperature of her cheeks. Her fingers touched the seatbelt in front of her. "What kind of phone do you like?" The man driving suddenly broke the silence. It was only then that Jinwan noticed that the car had been out for a long time. They had arrived at a nearby commercial street, and there were several electronic stores ahead. Mo Jingshan's cell phone was specially customized abroad. It was a very advanced smartphone. Today, 10 years ago, smartphones had not been fully popularized in the country. In the following years, Jinwan used the iPhone the most. She could use a cell phone for several years without feeling laggy. She felt comfortable using it. Mo Jingshan's eyes lit up. She looked around and pointed to the store in front. "I heard that last year, America released a phone called the iPhone. It's very useful." Mo Jingshan parked the car nearby. When he got out of the car, it was already noon. Today's weather was really warm. Jinwan wanted to leave her coat in the car, but under Mo Jingshan's cold gaze, she hurriedly put it on. "It's a little hot today." Jinwan wrapped the coat around her body and followed by Mo Jingshan's side. She softly muttered. In the end, her hand was held by him again. Mo Jingshan's tone was gentle and unhurried. "Your hands are so cold. Keep it on. You're not allowed to take it off." Jinwan had no choice. Right now, she felt that she was really being controlled by her husband, and strangely, she was willing to endure it. Following Mo Jingshan into the store, Jinwan immediately saw the phone placed on the counter. The words iPhone 3G were written on it. She really did not expect that one day she would actually run over to buy a second-generation Apple. Furthermore, it was before this phone was completely common in the country. The true Apple era would be 2 years later. Hearing the employee's introduction, Jinwan pursed her lips and did not speak. She held the phone and fiddled with it. "Do you like it a lot?" Mo Jingshan saw that she was all smiles as she held the phone. "And I'll take this one." Jinwan raised her head to look at him. "The functions aren't bad. I like it." Mo Jingshan indicated for the employee to write out the bill. Jinwan had the employee bring out another phone of the same model. There was only one color for this generation of phones, and the two were exactly the same. She turned to say, "Shall we make a couple model?" Mo Jingshan glanced at her. Right now, Jinwan was smiling very happily. It was as though there were stars in her eyes. He did not have high requirements for the phone. He only needed it to be private and safe. Seeing Jean Wan's childlike expression, he did not reject her. "I'll buy two." The employee was extremely excited. Right now, this phone was the most expensive on the market. Not many people were willing to buy it. In the end, they actually sold two at the same time. By the side, another employee who did not manage to snatch this deal asked with some jealousy, "Miss, are you sure you want to buy two? This phone isn't cheap. It costs more than 4,000 yuan. Jean Wan only smiled politely and did not reply. By the side, several employees who were jealous gathered together to whisper, "This man is so handsome. It seems like his identity isn't simple. He's so generous with his money. Is this woman being kept?" Chapter 58. She turned to see that Mo Jingshan had already gone to settle the bill. Jean Wan unhurriedly held onto his arm. "Hubby, the weather is good today. How about we shop a little longer?" Seeing this lovey-dovey scene, the two employees secretly spat in their hearts. This woman was really shameless. After buying her a phone, she directly called him hubby. With such a beautiful appearance, she really thought of herself as a vixen. Mo Jingshan's entire body exuded an unapproachable coldness. However, he only treated the woman by his side with gentleness and patience. His arm reached around her waist, gently holding her as they walked out. His clear voice entered the employee's ears. "Before 3 in the afternoon, all of my time belongs to Mrs. Mo. Where else do you want to shop? This business street is enough. There's no need to walk too far. The shopping malls in front are not bad. Let's go there, how about it?" The shop owners looked at each other in shock. "Oh, Mrs. Mo?" There were not many people with the surname Mo in Haicheng. Those with the surname Mo who were rich and seemed to have an extraordinary background were even fewer. They rushed to flip through the recent magazines and newspapers. After searching for a long time, they finally found a photo with Mo Jingshan's side profile. After taking a few glances, the employee's eyes almost fell out. That man earlier, his identity was indeed not simple. He was actually Mo Jingshan? In the photo there was even Jean Wan's side profile. It's really Mo Jingshan and Mrs. Mo? Our words earlier. Mrs. Mo should have heard it, right? What should we do? Did we offend them? The employee at the cashier glanced at them and rolled her eyes. Not only did Mrs. Mo hear it, even I can hear it from here. Do you think Mr. Mo heard it? He definitely heard it. Then what should we do? Mr. Mo doesn't even bother to look at you. You guys you have eyes but cannot see. Gossiping. You're destined to be useless for the rest of your lives. You deserve it. The employee's expressions immediately turned cold. Jean Wan had already left the shop. After walking a distance, she glanced at Mo Jingshan, who remained expressionless. You heard it earlier, didn't you? Mo Jingshan's tone was calm. Mrs. Mo's appearance is exceedingly beautiful. Because of this face, people often misunderstand that you have a mistress. I think there's no need for you to care about those two small companies. Just stay at home and be taken care of by me for the rest of your life. Jean Wan's eyes twitched. No matter how she heard it, she could hear the ridicule in his words. It's already past 1 o'clock. There are less than 2 hours before you go to the company at 3 o'clock. Jean Wan said as she walked. Do you want to eat something first? Hungry? Not yet. I ate the breakfast my husband personally made this morning and was stuffed. I don't feel hungry yet. Jean Wan followed by Mo Jingshan's side and did not forget to flatter him. I'll go back to the company after I'm done shopping. Let me know if you're hungry. What Jean Wan didn't know was that although the employees in the electronics store didn't meet with a sudden mishap, they still suffered because of the words they shouldn't have said. The manager suddenly called. Which two people dared to gossip behind someone's back? Hurry up and get them to pay this month's salary and scram. The two employees immediately rushed to answer the phone with a frightened expression. They said miserably, Manager, we really didn't do it on purpose. Earlier we didn't recognize Mr. and Mrs. Mo. We only said a few words casually. We didn't want to offend. Don't explain to me. Right now the two of you have already been placed on our blacklist. Leave immediately. The manager directly hung up. In order to save time, Jean Wan did not walk too far. She only strolled around the nearby shopping mall and then went to a large supermarket inside. The room in Aolan International was too simple. There weren't many daily necessities, so she bought a lot of daily necessities including pajamas and new towels. In the end, she even bought a set of especially comfortable blankets. Those who didn't know would think that the two of them were preparing for their wedding. In fact, for Jean Wan, This was the first time she had carefully filled a home that belonged to them. Although the U Garden was their wedding home, Aolan International was the closest to his company. She wanted to make their second home more lively. Before returning, Jinwan dragged Mo Jingshan to a nearby Chinese restaurant for a simple meal. This Chinese restaurant had been open for many years. Because the food was good and the price was not expensive, she had also eaten there several times in the past 10 years. However, every time she came she was alone, and she could only order the cheapest dish and a bowl of rice. When they were about to return to Aolan International, she sat in the car and said, "Just drop me off at the gate of the neighborhood. I'll bring my things in to tidy up. You can go straight to the company." Mo Jingshan glanced at the time. "There's no hurry. I'll send you up." Jinwan glanced at the pile of spoils she bought today in the car. Considering that she really couldn't carry so much, she did not refuse. The two returned to Aolan International. Mo Jingshan was carrying too many things in his hands. Jinwan pressed the password to the door. As expected, the password was her birthday. She turned to look at Mo Jingshan. The moment the door opened, he had already taken the things in. "Earlier in the supermarket, I didn't feel that I bought much. Only now do I realize that I really bought too much." Jinwan squatted on the ground and rummaged through the large pile of shopping bags. Mo Jingshan watched her. It was just a few daily necessities, but she was so satisfied as though she had obtained some treasure. "There are a lot of things. You won't be able to finish them by yourself. Call Auntie Chin to help you." Mo Jingshan's tone was light. Hearing this, Jinwan suddenly stood up, turned and quickly walked to the door. She reached out and hugged his waist like a reluctant little wife. "When will you be back?" "Not too late. I'll be back after a meeting and looking at some company documents." Mo Jingshan touched her hair. Jinwan was used to him treating her like a child. She buried her face in his chest. "Then let's stay here tonight. We'll return to the U Garden tomorrow." Mo Jingshan's hand paused on the top of her head. "All right." His tone softened. Jinwan stood on her tiptoes and kissed the corner of his lips. After kissing him, she was about to return to pack up the pile of things they had just bought. However, the moment she stepped back, her waist suddenly tightened. The man's kiss landed accurately on her lips. It was not as intense as the kiss on the bed last night. Instead, it was gentle and lingering, causing Jinwan's entire heart to melt. Her two hands gripped the collar of his trench coat, her eyes fixed on his face that was inches from hers. After kissing for a while, she did not forget that they were running out of time. She subconsciously pushed him away. In the end, she did not manage to push him away. Instead, she was pressed against the wall. Their lips and teeth intertwined, and as they kissed, they forgot about each other. Chapter 59. This was a long kiss. Earlier, Jinwan had yet to remove her coat. Right now, she could not tell if it was because of the heat or because her cheeks were flushed. Her sober charm was even more alluring to the man than last night. Mo Jingshan kissed her cheeks from time to time, his hoarse voice carrying a hint of seduction. "I like the pajamas you bought earlier. Remember to wear them tonight." Jinwan's face instantly turned embarrassed. Today, when she was at the mall, she had secretly bought a sexy set of pajamas when Mo Jingshan did not notice. Actually, it wasn't a particularly revealing style, but it looked quite cool. Back then she had bought it on a whim. She did not expect that he would actually see it. "No, that's a summer style." "Then you bought it now to leave it for a year?" The man chuckled lightly by her lips, kissing her again. "I have many clothes at home that I forget to wear after buying them. There are even some that I leave for 2 years. This won't change even if I leave it for a year." She had yet to finish speaking when she felt his grip on her waist tighten. She raised her head to see that his eyes were fixed on her, and his hand was placed on her waist. Her heart trembled from his stare. Jinwan shifted her eyes away and softly opened her mouth. Her tone was somewhat coquettish as she begged for mercy. "All right, I'll wear it." Although they had bought quite a lot of things, thankfully the house was very tidy. All Jinwan needed to do was to open the packaging of the newly bought items and place them where they should be placed. After tidying up for around an hour, she glanced at the time on her phone. It was already past 4 o'clock. It had been less than 24 hours since her accident last night. There was no sound of knocking on the door of the MO Corporation CEO's office. A tall figure dressed in a long dark gray coat directly walked in. There were no obstructions and no one dared to block his way. A set of documents was directly thrown onto the office table. Mo Jingshan did not look at the person who entered. He closed the documents in his hands and took a glance. His voice was heavy and his tone was bone-chilling. "The Zhou family's background, just these few pages?" The man standing in front of the office table coldly narrowed his eyes. he coldly snorted. The Zhou family is not simple. Otherwise, that Zhou Yinyan would not have the guts to lay her hands on your woman. A sparrow may be small, but it has all of its internal organs. After reading this, you will know what they have been doing in private for the past few years. With the strength behind them, they will definitely die a terrible death if they go against us openly. However, they did not dare to make any big moves in the open. They also understand that they will not gain any benefits if they go against us head-on. But if they frequently use underhanded methods, a young lady like Jin Wan, who has a clean background, will easily become food for them. Mo Jingshan did not make to speak. To Mo? That's because Jin Wan was quick to react and knew how to protect herself. Mo Jingshan's tone was cold. If something had really happened to her last night, right now, that surnamed Zhou would not even have the chance to lie in the emergency room and cry out in pain. The man in front of the desk coldly snorted. Based on last night's situation, it was indeed possible that Mo Jingshan would kill Zhou Yanyan. The office door was suddenly knocked on. Mo Jingshan coldly glanced at him. Come in. Shinmu walked in. The moment he saw Mo Jingshan sitting behind the desk, he turned to look at Nan Heng, whose eyes were dark and bewitching as he stood in front of the desk with a faint smile. Nan Heng was a frequent customer here. Shinmu did not treat him as an outsider and directly said in a low voice, "COMO, the Zhou Group's chairman and vice president wish to see you. They have been here for a long time, but I did not allow them to come up and delayed it until now. Right now it's almost time to get off work." Mo Jingshan's cold and indifferent eyes immediately glanced at Nan Heng, who did not show any signs of shock. "Your men are dead? Nan Heng. This Zhou Group's old chairman is already old. 2 days ago he was still lying in the hospital. Today he actually has the ability to stand up and come here. He has clearly been avoiding the previous conflict. Right now he doesn't want to offend the Mo family because of his ignorant granddaughter, so he can only come here with his old life to try and whitewash everything." Nan Heng's smile was cold. "My men can stop the Zhou family's bunch of useless people and control the Zhou family's movements. But who the F***K would have thought that this old fart would actually be able to jump up from the hospital?" Mo Jingshan glanced at the documents on the table, his cold and indifferent voice hinting at something. "Right now he's being watched by our men. How much ability does he have to whitewash this incident?" Nan Heng rubbed his chin, chuckling softly. "Before the power behind the Zhou family clashed with us, he was the last seemingly decent bargaining chip. However, in the end his calculations were wrong. Even if this old fart brought his head here, it would be useless." Mo Jingshan stared at the documents on the table and did not speak for a long time. The office was silent for a moment. Nan Heng suddenly raised his brows. "You've left America for so many years. It's been a long time since you've touched the underground business circle." It was still quiet. Mo Jingshan did not make a sound. The temperature in his eyes was extremely low. Nan Heng stared at him for half a minute, expressionlessly saying, "Don't tell me for that woman Jin Wan you're going to..." Mo Jingshan casually pushed the documents on the table. The documents slid to the end of the table. His tone was light. "Since we're all old friends, if I can regain control of this circle's economic lifeline and avenge Jin Wan, why not?" Nan Heng raised his brows, his eyes containing a hint of mockery. "After so many years, I've only just realized that there's actually a woman who can change your decision to not look back. Back then you left so cleanly. Now it's just for a Jin Wan you actually..." Nan Heng paused for a moment before chuckling meaningfully. "Could it be that the power of the marriage certificate is really too great? Or does she really have some ability? It seems like I can't help but look at Miss G in a different light." Mo Jingshan's voice was as light as snow. "Compared to you, who could abandon your newlywed wife in America for 2 years and not even see her face to face, I'm ashamed of my inferiority." "Nan Heng." The phone on the office table began to vibrate. Mo Jingshan glanced at it and saw that it was a call from Qin Sighting. He reached out to pick it up. "Still in the office?" Qin Sighting's lazy voice was mixed with a hint of laughter. "What's the matter? Your wife suddenly ran to our hospital earlier." Mo Jingshan's brows moved. "She went to the hospital?" Chapter 60. Qin Sighting's voice was lazy as he chuckled softly. "I'm guessing that she won't be able to stay idle tonight. She should be planning on taking revenge. Earlier, I saw her enter a sex toy store near the hospital and buy a bottle of that thing." Mo Jingshan placed the phone down. His gaze was calm and distant. "Han Tianyuan is still in the bar on the east side of the city?" he calmly asked. "Zhou Yinyan was still lying in the hospital. If Jin Wan wanted a taste of her own medicine, she could only look for Han Tianyuan. Nan Heng had heard the contents of the call earlier. He coldly said, "From last night until now, he did not dare to return to the Han family. The Han family stocks fell overnight. Everyone is in a mess. For now, no one is thinking about whether this trash is dead or alive." He hid in the small bar, drunk and dreaming for an entire day and night. Right now he should already be unconscious. Do you want to stomp his hand or stomp his family jewels? You can make him bleed at any moment. Mo Jingshan was indifferent. Don't touch him for now. Wait for Jin Wan to go over. Let her do it herself. Since she wanted revenge, he would give her a satisfying chance. After hearing this, Nan Heng snorted. Let her do it herself? Then do I have to send a few bodyguards to follow her secretly and make her think that she was able to take down Han Tianyuan, this grandson, with her own abilities? Mo Jingshan indifferently curved his lips. That's good. Nan Heng coldly mocked. After knowing you for more than 10 years, I've discovered that you, Mo Jingshan, are really deranged when it comes to spoiling women. Mo Jingshan indifferently glanced at him. Too ashamed to show your face? Nan Heng's lips curved into a cold smile. Jin Wan held the test report in her hands. The drug that Zhou Yanyan had given her was indeed something rarely seen on the market called the aphrodisiac dew. It was similar to the more famous Viagra in America. It was one of the most effective drugs. Too much of it was smeared on the cup. As long as one's saliva touched it, it was enough to stimulate one's spirit and cause one to be affected by the drug. In front of the small bar on the east side of the city, Jin Wan had several young hooligans that she had hired to investigate the situation. After confirming that Han Tianyuan was indeed inside, there was also another huge gain. That was, a C-list celebrity that Han Tianyuan dated last year was also inside. This celebrity had a history of drug abuse and was a scourge that everyone in the industry avoided like the plague. Jin Wan coldly handed the drinks she had prepared to the hooligans, giving them a look. This matter won't implicate you. Once you're done, leave this area immediately. I'll treat it as though you never came tonight. A few punks nodded. They had done a lot of things like stealing chickens and dogs. Moreover, this beautiful woman in front of them generously gave them a lot of money. They quickly sneaked into the bar. Half an hour later, they whistled out as if nothing had happened. When they reached the door, they cast a look at Jin Wan in the distance and then quietly slipped away. Jin Wan paused outside for a moment before walking straight into the bar. When she arrived at the private room Han Tianyuan was in, as expected, the sound of wine bottles colliding had already turned into the unsteady breathing of a man and a woman. There were also the low moans of a woman and the rough breathing of a man. A waiter from the bar passed by. Jin Wan curved her lips at the waiter and calmly placed 200 yuan bills on the tray of drinks in front of him. I'll have to trouble this little brother to help me with something. I followed my ex-boyfriend here. He cheated on several women and is fickle and heartless. I've been with him for so long, yet I've been treated like this. I really can't take it anymore, so I came here to take a look. Can you help me secretly take a photo of the inside when you deliver the drinks? As long as the angle is good, I can add another 300 yuan. Jin Wan was all smiles. She originally had a face that could topple cities. Under the flickering neon lights of the private room, the young waiter's soul was immediately hooked away. He replied, I can take a photo, but you mustn't let my boss find out. Otherwise I'll lose my job. Don't worry, this is my own matter. I'll keep it a secret. After you send the photo to me, delete it. No one will implicate you. Jin Wan winked at him as she spoke, waving the wallet in her hand at him. The waiter finally nodded. He took out his phone from his pocket and placed it in an inconspicuous spot on the tray. He directly knocked on the door and entered. The moment the door opened, Jin Wan did not enter. She continued to stand by the wall, but she could hear the interweaving voices of the man and woman inside. It seemed like they were already in a mess. Clearly, the effects of the medicine were very fast. She had spent a large sum of money to buy the exact same medicine as last night. The waiter came out after a few minutes. When he came out, his gaze was slightly uncomfortable. After all, the scene was really too. Seeing that Jin Wan was still guarding the door, he immediately asked with a look of disbelief, "Which one of them is your ex-boyfriend? Those men and women are directly starting on the sofa." He did not finish his words. The waiter's gaze was somewhat pitiful as he looked at Jin Wan. It was as though he felt that it was a tragic experience for her to meet such a shameless man who could casually make love to a woman in a private room. Jin Wan smiled slightly at him. "Did you take a photo?" The waiter nodded and handed the phone to her. Jin Wan took the phone and flipped through several extremely erotic photos. She sent them all to her phone and then handed the 300 yuan she promised to the waiter. She turned and entered the bathroom across the corridor. In the bathroom, Jin Wan anonymously sent the photo of Han Tianyuan and that third-rate celebrity on the sofa to the Han Corporation's public email account. She then casually made a call. "Hello? Eldest Miss G?" The person who picked up the phone was a reporter from a newspaper that Jin Wan once knew. Right now, the other party had already been promoted to the editor-in-chief of a weekly gossip magazine. He loved to write about the romantic affairs of wealthy families and had a high exposure rate. "I'll give you a piece of news. Whether or not you can arrive in time will depend on your own ability," Jin Wan said unhurriedly. Jin Wan's tone was unhurried as she said, "Someone reported that Han Tianyuan was taking drugs in a bar. His target was the second female lead of a recently popular television drama. The police are about to come and arrest him. Such a big piece of news, you have to hurry." "Which bar?" The other party's voice instantly rose as though he was afraid of missing out on such a big piece of news. Jin Wan coldly curved her lips. "East of the city Miyi Bar." After speaking, she directly hung up the phone. She turned back and coldly glanced at the private room that was about to turn into a mess. After confirming that the media was about to arrive, she lazily looked at the phone screen and dialed 110. A big show that even the police in the entertainment industry were alarmed. It had to be more lively. Chapter 61. She did not expect to meet him here. The last time she saw him was in the hospital where Xia Tian was staying. The other party did not seem to have noticed her. Jin Wan shifted her gaze away, turning to leave the bar. Jin Wan sat by the window of a nearby cafe, sipping on a light milk coffee while watching the show. The media arrived at the scene 5 minutes before the police. In this short amount of time, not only did they successfully capture Han Corporation's young master Han Tianyuan's unbearably dissolute side, but they also captured a famous third-rate female celebrity's drug scandal. They also completely solidified the fact that Han Tianyuan had been caught taking drugs in a bar with a prostitute. Han Tianyuan's disheveled appearance when he was brought out of the bar was so disgusting that it could not be more disgusting. After watching all of this, the coffee in Jin Wan's cup had already turned cold. It was currently 8:30 at night. Although everything was progressing smoothly, it made her more or less a little suspicious. However, Han Tianyuan was currently hiding in a bar in dire straits. Today she heard that something had happened to the Han family in the stock market, so he probably couldn't send anyone to order around. He didn't even have a bodyguard right now, so it wasn't strange that there weren't any of his people guarding outside in this kind of small bar. Hai Cheng's nighttime was not particularly safe, especially in the east side of the city. Jin Wan saw that there were 2 police cars nearby and walked out. Originally, she wanted to flag down a taxi by the roadside. All of a sudden, her phone rang with the iPhone's melodious ringtone. The moment she saw that it was Mo Jingshan's call, she could not help but raise her hands to tuck her hair behind her ears and pick up the call. "Hello? Where are you?" The man's voice came from the phone. It was calm and clear. Jin Wan glanced at the nearby police cars. After confirming that she was safe and that there would not be any danger, she then honestly said, "I'm in the east side of the city. Earlier, I dealt with some matters." Mo Jingshan's car was parked about 200 meters away from where Jin Wan was. This little woman's gaze was focused on the nearby police cars and did not notice this direction. She even knew to call for a taxi when the police were nearby. It could be seen that Jin Wan's sense of self-preservation was not bad. Mo Jingshan's voice was low and his tone was mild. "Your new phone has a GPS function. Send it to me." Nan Heng sat at the side, his cold and coquettish eyes dimming, and then he rolled his eyes. Motherf *Ker, he was clearly only 200 meters away from that woman, yet she still wanted him to send her location. Mo Jingshan's current plan? No one would believe him if he told anyone about what had happened today. Even Nan Heng and Qin Sighting, who had known Mo Jingshan for more than 10 years, couldn't believe that the person coaxing Jin Wan to send the location was Mo Jingshan. Jin Wan was surprised. "Are you coming to pick me up? I can take a taxi back." Before she could finish her sentence, the other party had already hung up. "Jin Wan, the Mo Corporation's building was a little far from here." She hesitated for a moment, not sure if Mo Jingshan knew what she had done tonight. Although there was nothing to hide, she looked around again. Seeing no taxi passing by, she could only pick up her cell phone and send her location to him. Earlier in the bar, Jin Wan had a vengeful and fierce appearance. Now that she was being coaxed by Mo Jingshan, she did not notice the car on this side and obediently sent her location over. Nan Heng sneered. If Mo Jingshan was not by the side, he would have really said the word, stupid. Behind them there was a commotion outside the bar. The police were yelling and various men and women were crying and screaming. Jinwan stood by the side of the road. She did not turn back to look at the commotion, but she could hear how chaotic the scene was tonight. Several minutes later, the black ghost stopped in front of her. The car window slowly rolled down, revealing Mo Jingshan's calm and gentle face. The man had a cool and gentle demeanor, his hands casually resting on the steering wheel. There was no one else in the car. Jinwan was slightly surprised. So fast? I was nearby earlier. I was on the way to pick you up. Mo Jingshan did not explain further. On the way. The east side of the city was considered the least prosperous area in Haicheng. The quality of the people living here was not high, and it was very chaotic. Mo Jingshan rarely came to this area. Why was it such a coincidence that it was on the way? On the way back, Jinwan was slightly drowsy. Being in Mo Jingshan's car allowed her to lower her guard. A sense of security surrounded her, and she was filled with drowsiness. Last night she did not sleep much. Under his body her energy was running low, but in the end, it did not end as she wished. Again and again, no matter how she begged, it was useless. He only let her go in the wee hours. This entire day she did not rest much. Although Jinwan was prepared in the bar earlier, she was still somewhat on guard to prevent any mistakes from happening. Right now, all her emotions and senses were relaxed. She closed her eyes and almost fell asleep. However, her stomach was still slightly hungry. She resisted the sleepiness and opened her eyes to look out of the car window. She saw that the car had already arrived near Aolan International. You didn't eat tonight? Mo Jingshan asked. In the afternoon, the two of them had casually eaten at the commercial street. Furthermore, it was already 9 o'clock. It would be a lie to say that they were not hungry. Jinwan nodded and then glanced at him anxiously. Seeing her expression as though she had something to say, Mo Jingshan only glanced at her. He drove the car to Aolan International's parking lot. The car stopped and he calmly said, "There's a restaurant nearby. What do you want to eat?" Jinwan unbuckled her seatbelt. "Let's go home to eat. We've already arrived at Aolan International. Just in time. Let's go back to eat." Mo Jingshan watched her. His eyes seemed to contain an endless ocean. His voice was clear. "Go home? What?" Jinwan suddenly chuckled. "I'll eat whatever you cook." Mo Jingshan, several seconds later, his lips curved into a thin smile. His voice was mild. "Since when do I have to be responsible for cooking your dinner?" Jinwan rubbed her hungry stomach and stared at him anxiously. "It's already so late. We'll have to sleep soon after eating. The food in the restaurant won't be easy to digest. Why don't we eat some noodles? So we'll just go home and cook some noodles?" "I'll cook noodles?" Mo Jingshan's handsome brows moved slightly. "That's right." Jinwan's gaze clearly said, she really wanted to eat. After all, this was the first time she had eaten Mo Jingshan's personally cooked breakfast. She had thought about it for the entire day and felt that it was not too much to ask for a bowl of noodles. Mo Jingshan watched her gaze and chuckled softly. "Get off the car." And? Jinwan first responded before raising her eyes to look at him. "You agree?" Mo Jingshan did not reply. He had already gotten off the car. Jinwan rushed to open the car door and follow. There was a small supermarket near Aolan International's parking lot. It was very down-to-earth and friendly. Jinwan followed Mo Jingshan in and watched as Mo bought some seasonings and noodles. She then saw Mo pass a black card to the lady boss of the supermarket because he did not bring any cash with him to the company in the afternoon. Chapter 62. The moment the lady boss saw the black card, the corner of her lips twitched. She knew that there were many rich people living in this area, but if they had to swipe a black card just to buy a green onion or 2 bags of seasoning, she really did not dare to accept it. Seeing this, Jinwan quickly reached out to press down Mo Jingshan's hand that was holding out the card. She quickly took out a 50 yuan bill from her bag and handed it to the dumbfounded lady boss. "Ahem, your change is 31 yuan and 80 cents. After the lady boss returned the money, her gaze could not help but shift from Jinwan back to Mo Jingshan. Even the lady boss's daughter by the side stared at them with an infatuated expression. The cold man was tall and slender. He had an aura that attracted attention, and it was hard to accurately describe his aura. It was cold and distant but could not be ignored. He's so rich, yet he actually personally bought these things. Seeing that they had left, the lady boss and her daughter softly muttered. Their words were filled with envy. Jin Wan forcefully dragged Mo Jingshan out. Although she did not think much of it earlier, she felt that the way the lady boss's daughter stared at him was like a hungry wolf that had seen its prey. She really could not ignore it. She dragged a man who was much taller than her out just like that. Mo Jingshan held the little things he had just bought with one hand while his other hand remained in his trouser pocket. His long legs unhurriedly paced as he accompanied her home. Actually, Jin Wan was also considering whether Mo Jingshan would be busy in the office in the afternoon. If he was very tired after work, she could cook noodles for him after returning home. In the end, the moment they entered, Mo Jingshan had her wait obediently. He tossed her a black trench coat, turned around and unbuttoned his exquisite and expensive shirt. He rolled up his high-quality sleeves and turned to enter the kitchen. Jin Wan watched the man's silhouette that she could not shift her gaze away from. She subconsciously swallowed a mouthful of saliva. This man, why was he always like this all the time? A feast for the eyes. The noodles she was looking forward to as well as the man cooking the noodles. For some strange reason, she recalled the scene last night when she was pressed down on the bed by him. That was the other side of Mo Jingshan. In bed, this man was definitely not as gentle and indifferent as he looked on the surface. Jin Wan felt that she might not be able to remain calm. She stood in front of the door for a long time, blushed, and went straight into the bedroom. Sitting on the bed, she finally noticed that she was still holding onto Mo Jingshan's coat. She glanced outside and heard the sound of water boiling in the kitchen. She lowered her head and brought the black coat to her nose, smelling it. He sniffed again. It was as clean and refreshing as the morning air. She was not sure if Mo Jingshan had ever smoked before, but she did not remember seeing him smoke in front of her. There was a very, very faint smell of tobacco on his body. If she did not smell it carefully, she would not be able to tell. She did not know if he smoked when he was busy with work or if it was the smell of cigarettes in the company's conference room. But it smells good. In the kitchen. His phone rang. Mo Jingshan stirred the noodles in the water with one hand and took out his phone with the other. He then placed it by his ear. What's the matter? Nan Heng's seductive voice came coldly from the phone. This time the Zhou family and the Han family have suffered quite a blow. The Han family is basically crippled. Although the Zhou family has some background, they did not dare to act rashly due to propriety. With your woman's help, Han Tianyuan is currently squatting naked in the police station and being interrogated. He managed to obtain some information that you might be interested in. Tomorrow I'll have Shinmu bring it to you. Mo Jingshan calmly responded. Nan Heng could hear that his tone did not sound like he was resting or accompanying a woman on the bed. He casually asked, haven't you already returned to Aolan International? You haven't rested? It was yet another indifferent response. Nan Heng coldly sneered. The tip of his tongue pushed against the corner of his lips as he snorted. Are you busy in the study? Then I'll hang up first. You go do what you need to do. Mo Jingshan held the phone with one hand and placed a few seasonings into the boiling water with the other. His tone was calm. I'm cooking noodles. Nan Heng? He could. Damn it, he's really good. The great Mo Jingshan, who had just sent 2 large families into hell, did not even blink when he saw Zhou Yanyan's twitching lower body lying in the hospital with tears of blood in her eyes. In the blink of an eye, he returned home and actually started cooking noodles. Is it your woman who wants to eat noodles? No wonder Jin Wan, that woman, is so stupid in front of you. She was indeed deceived by your appearance. Diske, you actually know how to cook noodles for a woman. Nan Heng coldly sneered. This old man has been your brother for so many years with Qin sighting, but I've never even drunk a cup of water that you personally served. How many bowls did you cook? Let's go over and freeload for a meal. I want to see if you've drugged her noodles with some bewitching soup. Otherwise, why would she suddenly be so devoted to you? There was no response from the phone. However, Nan Heng's hearing was extremely good. He heard the sound of Mo Jingshan breaking eggs. It was a very crisp sound. Nan Heng. This noodles is quite rich. There's even eggs. Mo Jingshan calmly asked, want to eat? Maybe in your next life. A voice without any warmth or giving any face rang from Mo Jingshan's side. Following that, the call was directly hung up. Nan Heng. 10 minutes later, the dinner that Jin Wan had been looking forward to finally appeared on the dining table. She happily picked up her chopsticks and took a bite. She was really touched. Previously in the Yu Garden, she had insisted on showing off her skills in the kitchen. She thought that the noodles she cooked were extremely delicious and would definitely move Mo Jingshan's heart. In the end, Mo Jingshan was not moved at all. Now that she had eaten the noodles he cooked, her skills were really, tsk, completely not presentable. After eating half a bowl, she raised her eyes to look at the man who sat at the same table as her. Although he was eating the same food as her, he remained calm and elegant. Mo Jingshan raised his eyelids due to her gaze. He mildly curved his lips. Do I look more delicious than the noodles in your bowl? Jinwan swallowed a mouthful of noodles. She really wanted to answer yes. However, her rationality prevented her from speaking up. After all, last night the great CEO Mo had a taste of meat. If she dared to casually flirt with him, she most likely would not be able to sleep tonight. As she ate, she softly and vaguely asked, "Today's incident at the bar in the east of the city, do you know about it?" "You hope that I don't know?" The man's voice was low and mild. His voice was still pleasant and magnetic. However, she could still hear it. As expected. At that time she felt that it was slightly strange. Everything went so smoothly that it was inconceivable. Based on the situation at that time, shouldn't Han Tianyuan be in a state of panic and surrounded by enemies? If he wanted to drink, he would drink. No matter how he mingled, he would not be so foolish as to bring an ex-girlfriend with a history of drug addiction over. Chapter 63. So, that C-list celebrity was also arranged by you? When I arrived, were you already prepared to deal with Han Tianyuan? Jinwan had already grasped the situation tonight. You have to act quickly. After all, you can't give him a chance to retaliate. Otherwise, the one in danger will still be you, the man calmly stated. He did not plan on hiding this topic for too long. Jinwan lowered her head, slurping another mouthful of noodles. Since the incident tonight happened right under Mo Jingshan's eyes, then the reason why everything went smoothly was logical. If I had known that you were watching from the side, I wouldn't have worked so hard. Jinwan used her chopsticks to poke at the noodles. I hope that my sudden intervention didn't bring you any trouble. What trouble could there be? Jinwan supported her chin with one hand, looking at him. She suddenly smiled. That's right. I wanted to take the opportunity to teach that Han fellow a lesson. Otherwise, my heart would really be stifled. But since you were nearby, why didn't you come out to tell me? Mo Jingshan's gaze was as calm as the sea. Are you satisfied now? Jinwan stared at him and suddenly smiled. So, he was purposely giving her a chance to vent her anger, right? Jinwan pursed her lips, lowering her head to continue eating. However, she could not help but smile. The time was already approaching 10:30 p.m. Jinwan had eaten quite a bit and paced around the living room for a while to aid her digestion. Mo Jingshan was on the phone, so Jinwan did not disturb him. When she heard his footsteps approaching, she raised her eyes to look at him. That's right. Today, when I was organizing my things, I found that the door to the room beside your study couldn't be opened. Mo Jingshan's dark and calm eyes paused for a moment. His brows were especially deep. If you can't open it, just leave it there. The other rooms here are enough for you. Oh, that's true. Jinwan was tired from walking and sat down on the sofa. When Mo Jingshan approached, she was still thinking that the door lock did not seem to be broken. Instead, it seemed like it had been intentionally locked. But from yesterday until now, she had not seen Mo Jingshan stop by the door. It should have been locked a long time ago? She just wanted to ask. The man behind her suddenly circled her waist, handsome eyebrows and eyes suddenly close to her eyes, thin lips on her cheek, breath warm. Why didn't you wear that nightgown? She had been busy all night and had forgotten what she had promised in the afternoon. Jinwan coughed. She said nothing. He pretended not to hear anything. The man's voice was low and husky. Are you forcing me to kiss you? Jinwan turned to face him and was about to say that she had not even showered and was still wearing the clothes she wore during the day. However, as soon as she turned around, she was kissed by the man. From last night onwards, kissing was like the fuse for a certain X-rated action movie. Yesterday, even though she was the one who was drugged and couldn't help asking for more due to the drug, she was still stunned by Mo Jingshan's stamina. If it weren't for the drug's effect, she wouldn't have been able to get out of bed this morning because she was too sensitive last night. Otherwise, based on the situation last night, she reckoned that she would have been extremely sore today. Who said that it wouldn't hurt the second time? It was hard to not get used to this kind of thing. Besides, this man's stamina and cough, size, whatever, it was not something she could quickly adapt to. Jinwan's entire body softened from the kiss in his arms. She then thought that if they continued kissing in the middle of the night, it might cause the fire to spread. She quickly raised her hand to push against his chest. She could not push him away and was kissed even deeper. She was kissed until her entire body was numb and even her scalp was numb. After pushing for a long time, she gradually lost her strength. In the end, due to the difficulty in breathing, she weakly fell into the man's embrace. Her fingers subconsciously tightened around his clothes. In her daze, the man's hand reached into his clothes. Jinwan suddenly returned to herself and pushed against his chest. Last night? She wanted to ask if he could let her have a good night's sleep. Mo Jingshan really released her. Jinwan forcefully took 2 deep breaths, only to realize that her clothes were already disheveled as she was pressed against the sofa. She gathered her clothes. It seems like staying here has actually allowed you to touch me at any time. It's really my mistake. Mo Jingshan chuckled softly. He did not plan to give her any time to tidy up her clothes. He leaned over and pressed her back down. His gaze was so deep that it seemed as though he could swallow her up in an instant. His voice was low and husky, seductive. What do you mean? Jinwan's face was flushed. In the Yu garden, the sofa is on the 1st floor. You can't do anything because Auntie Chen and the helpers are all here. You can only do it in the bedroom. I haven't tried it. How do you know I can't? The man's voice was completely husky. Before his last word landed, he leaned down to kiss her again. Jinwan curled up under his body. It was not an exaggeration to say that she was trembling from the kiss. Her body was tense. She felt as though all of her senses were being pulled along with the entanglement between their lips. She was completely passive, but it also heated up from the top of her head to the bottom of her feet. After kissing for a while, he gradually kissed her cheeks, the corner of her lips, her chin, and her cheeks. He then moved to the back of her ears. This man seemed to be very familiar with every part of her body. The moment Jinwan felt her ears being kissed, she felt as though her head was about to explode. She trembled violently. He chuckled softly, nibbling by her ears. Don't hold it in. Isn't it good to be like last night? Like last night? Jinwan's consciousness blurred as she recalled the scene when she was wrapped around his body like an octopus. Also, the way she cried and screamed was completely unlike her. She rushed to raise her hand, using it to cover her eyes from the man's fiery gaze. Her hands gripped his clothes tightly, but she tilted her head to avoid him. There's still time to rest after working. Last night we did it so many times. You should at least let me have a good sleep today. Don't kiss. The man's kiss landed by her ears once more. She instantly lost control of herself, and even her tone became much softer. Mo Jingshan was aware of her sensitivity. How could she be so sensitive? There were many sensitive places on her body. It was only because he usually let her off and did not tease her so much that she was able to avoid him for so long. He chuckled softly by her ears. If you don't kiss here, do you want to kiss somewhere else? Jinwan subconsciously moved her lips forward. She would rather be kissed until she was drunk than lose control when he kissed another place. In the end, the kiss did not land. The man directly lifted her clothes. Chapter 64. Jinwan's cheeks were red, and her long hair was scattered on the sofa. She was kissed by him until she was as charming as a puddle of water. Mo Jingshan watched her appearance and smiled as he kissed her ear. He chuckled hoarsely. Last night you begged me. Are you trying to destroy the bridge after crossing it? Jinwan glared at him angrily, lowering her head to bite his finger. Mo Jingshan's gaze darkened. Not only did he not pull his hand back, he took the opportunity when she could not bear to bite for too long to reach in. Are you sure you'll only bite this place tonight? Jinwan grabbed the pillow on the sofa and threw it harshly at his face. However, the man avoided it with a smile and pressed her against the sofa, unable to move. Pervert. I've never said that I'm a gentleman. I'm definitely not one in front of Mrs. Mo. He pinched her reddened face. He kissed her again. Jinwan recalled the word bite he had said earlier and decided to bite him. In the end, with this bite, the originally gentle and patient kiss turned into a torrential intimacy. It was even more oppressive. One. The man's voice was near her ear. Jinwan was already dizzy from his kiss. Even her initial resistance was weakening. When she heard him murmuring her name, she immediately raised her eyes to look at his deep gaze. Mo Jingshan softly bit her name and suddenly held one of her hands. While Jinwan was still in a daze, he pulled her hand down his body. Jinwan's face heated up. She hurriedly tried to withdraw her hand but was held down by the man. She could not struggle out of his grasp. Mo Jingshan, after you've tasted meat, you don't know how to control yourself anymore, do you? Move your hand away. Don't. The man's breath was hot. In the quiet night, she could only hear his sexy and low voice against the corner of her lips. Before this, I also thought that I had a clear heart and few desires. Did he mean that he did not plan on continuing to clear his heart and few desires? Jinwan's entire body trembled from his kiss on her neck. You, could it be that before you got married, you didn't, with other women? Men all have normal physiological urges. Compared to other men, I'm more used to controlling myself. Then? Jinwan's voice became much hoarser. Then you should control yourself. Anyway, last night, I can't. He chuckled softly, kissing her ear. Jinwan glared at him. Why not? Didn't you just say that you're more restrained than other men? I'm still sore all over. Can't I rest for a night? Against you, Jinwan said. Jinwan, and was kissed again. At the same time he let go of her hand. Just as she heaved a sigh of relief, her body was suddenly suspended in the air, and her whole body was carried horizontally. She subconsciously let out a low cry and raised her hands to grab his shoulders and arms. She was already dizzy from the kiss and was about to speak when the man lowered his head to block her lips. She could only whimper. Nwanji and her. And Nwanji Amo and Nwanshi as well. As she is Amo as. Nwan. And? She was still wearing the clothes she wore during the day. When she was carried into the bedroom and thrown onto the bed, most of her clothes had already been taken off. He kissed her chin, neck, and collarbone. Slowly he moved down. It was soft to the touch. She was not sure if it was because the air conditioner was turned on, but the temperature in the room was slightly high. She could feel his palms caressing her white waist muscles. She could not help but shiver. At this moment she was conscious. He was as well. She held onto his shoulders, feeling the heat from his body. She could not help but softly beg for mercy. Jing Shin, the man who firmly suppressed her, tightened even more because of her voice. His hands were already starting to probe her every inch, and they were about to break through her defense. Jinwan could not control herself in his arms. She whimpered, Don't. He kissed her again, sealing her soft cries. It was gentle and coaxing. He did not give her any chance to breathe. She heard him chuckle by her ear. Even if you cry, you can't stop. Under his gaze, Jinwan could not help but turn her head away. Her hands were still clasped tightly around his shoulders. She moved uneasily. Amo Jingshin, this man is really... She was almost crying. Her words were no longer coherent. She turned her face back, burying her head into his neck. Her entire body softened. His other hand landed on various parts of her body at the same time, bringing with it waves of heat and trembling. Jinwan was tortured to the point where all the nerves in her body were screaming. She felt that she was about to go crazy. She had been teased to this state. Right now, her situation was no different from last night. She wanted to directly press him down on the bed. Who asked him to purposely drag his feet and torture her? Earlier she kept saying that she wanted to rest. Right now he was clearly forcing her to beg him. Jinwan bit her lips, resisting the urge to make a sound. However, Mo Jingshin did not want to let her have it easy. He used kisses to force her lips open, prying open her teeth. Jinwan gradually could not hold back her soft moans. His fingers stopped. His slight movements brought with it a raging wave. Jinwan subconsciously wanted to avoid it, but it was impossible. When he finally stopped teasing her, he fiercely sank into the deepest part. Jinwan whimpered. She bit down on the man's shoulder. As expected, this man, Mo Jingshin, would always shatter her understanding of him in bed. His gentleness and calmness had disappeared. Instead, his desires grew stronger. There was no longer any trace of the so-called restraint and lack of desires. The bedsheets had just been changed this morning. After tonight, it was likely that they would have to be changed again. She gripped onto his arm tightly, completely losing control. Mo Jingshin narrowed his deep eyes, glancing at her with a hoarse laugh. He leaned down to whisper by her ear. Jinwan? Pervert. Mo Jingshin pinched her chin and kissed her under her expression that looked like she wanted to crawl into a hole. In the end, her entire body seemed to be exhausted as she softly said, I haven't showered. Mo Jingshin's kiss landed on the back of her neck. He laughed hoarsely. I'll shower in a bit. A moment later, he carried her into the bathroom. In the end, she was squeezed by him for a long time in the bathroom. When Jinwan was carried back to the bedroom, the bedsheets had already been changed. It was easy to guess that he had returned to change them while she was in the shower. The moment she touched the bed, she immediately flipped over. She wanted to pull the blanket over herself, wanting to wrap herself up into a cocoon. Before she could fall asleep, she was pulled out of the blankets by the man who had just showered and smelled like her. He covered her up properly, lifted the blankets and came in, hugging her naked body into his arms. Jinwan did not dare to move in his embrace. She was afraid that she would accidentally tease him again. She obediently buried her face in his embrace, determined not to move. Chapter 65. The morning light was quiet. Jinwan had been bullied badly last night and slept very soundly. She thought that Mo Jingshan would have already left for the company, so she opened her eyes and got up. However, before she could move, she was suddenly pressed back by an arm from behind. Her back was pressed against a chest that was just as naked as hers. She was startled and turned to look at the man lying by her side. His perfect face was so handsome under the morning light that it made one suspect that he was the only flawless product created by God. Although he had just woken up, his black eyes were as clear as water. After being oppressed for an entire night, she was really a little afraid of him. She subconsciously twisted her body to avoid him, but he pressed her down on the bed and she could not get up. "Why are you awake?" The man's voice carried a light and hoarse tone. "It's almost 9 o'clock. Why didn't you go to work? The senior management meeting starts at 10. This place is close to the company, so I'll sleep with you for 2 more hours. There's no rush." Jinwan felt that she had led this usually strict man astray. Mo Jingshan was actually sleeping in with her during the workday. However, this could not be considered sleeping in. Last night, not only did she almost lose her voice, but she was also so tired that she suspected she would not be able to leave the house for 2 days. She turned her head and saw that the man's black hair was slightly messy. He did not look like the CEO Mo, who was usually dressed in a shirt and trousers that no one dared to approach. He was so real and intimate that her heart pounded harshly. "Not going to continue sleeping?" he asked. Jinwan wanted to say that the man seemed more dangerous in the morning, but seeing that Mo Jingshan seemed to really intend to sleep with her under the blanket, she did not get up. Right now her entire body was sore. It would be good to sleep a little longer. She glanced to the side and saw that the man's shoulders and back were covered with various scratches. Of course these were all from her. She retracted her gaze, but from the corner of her eyes she couldn't help but look at the man's calm and handsome face when he closed his eyes again. He didn't look like the man who had bullied her for the entire night last night at all. Unknowingly she fell asleep in his arms again. However, this time, after sleeping for less than an hour, she abruptly opened her eyes. Her hand touched the bedside. There was still the scent of Mo Jingshan's body, but he was not there. Jinwan opened her eyes and turned over. As though smelling something nice, she glanced toward the door of the bedroom. If, in the future, he could personally cook for her the next morning to reward her body and her stomach after being oppressed by him like this for an entire night, she didn't mind training more in the future for the sake of Boss Mo's personal cooking. Otherwise, she would be tormented by him until her bones were about to fall apart. Jinwan was attracted by the fragrance of the food and could no longer lie down. She abruptly sat up, pushed aside the blankets and got off the bed. She was about to head to the closet to find the clothes she had bought yesterday to wear. In the end, as soon as he stood on the ground, he fell back onto the bed. His legs were so weak that he couldn't even stand up. She fell onto the bed and remained silent for a few seconds before gritting her teeth and standing up. She forced herself to open the wardrobe. She had just taken out a set of clothes and was about to return to the bed when her legs began to ache unbearably. She fell to the side and rushed to support herself against the wardrobe door when Mo Jingshan, who had abruptly entered the bedroom, caught her with one hand and pressed her, who was still naked, into his embrace. "How can you fall in the bedroom?" "Fall." Her legs were clearly weak and she couldn't stand properly. "All right." Jinwan threw the clothes in her hands at him. "I've been squeezed dry by you. If this continues, I won't even be able to step out of the door." Mo Jingshan saw her flushed face and resentful expression. He chuckled softly. "No strength? Do you still have the strength to eat breakfast?" Jinwan turned her head away from him. He clearly saw how she had fallen earlier, yet he was still teasing her. This was the first time she had discovered the viciousness hidden in this man's bones. She was angered to death. Although she had turned her head away, her hands snatched the clothes back from his hands. She turned her head and put on a long loose home dress. Mo Jingshan saw her slightly puffed up cheeks and chuckled. Then Jinwan was abruptly lifted up by his waist. She turned around with a guarded expression. "What are you doing? Aren't you weak?" "I'll carry you to eat," he said concisely. By the time he finished speaking, he had already carried her out of the bedroom. The dining table was bathed in sunlight. It was not until Mo Jingshan sat down with her in his arms, put her on his lap, and fed her a glass of warm milk that she came back to herself. Flattered, she rushed to get out of his arms. Help! Mo Jingshan was trying to take her life, wasn't he? Her little heart really couldn't take it. Before she could move away from his embrace, Mo Jingshan pressed down on her. "You don't even have the strength to drink milk?" Jinwan understood and rushed to snatch the glass from his hands. She drank a large gulp and then pointed at her own mouth, indicating that she could drink it. "I'll eat it myself, eat it myself." Earlier she had wanted to act coquettishly, but Mo Jingshan was really black-bellied. Yesterday's breakfast was Chinese. Although today's breakfast was simple, it could still be considered Western. After being served so well by Boss Missouri, Jinwan suddenly felt that she did not want to return to the Yu Garden. What to do? Seeing that Jinwan wanted to stay here permanently, Mo Jingshan arranged for the people from the Yu Garden to move some of her things over. He also sent Andy Chin over to help her tidy up, but Jinwan ultimately asked Andy Chin to return. Subconsciously, she still hoped that this would be a quiet home that belonged only to her and Mo Jingshan. There was no need for servants, nor did she need Andy Chen's help for everything. After all, she was no longer the Ji family's young miss. 10 years had already transformed Jinwan into someone who could stand on her own. At around 11 o'clock, she was in the study organizing the laptop she had just brought over. She wanted to check on the latest information related to property in the country. Furthermore, the company had recently changed its boss and was undergoing a personnel reorganization. She could use this time to familiarize herself with the internal and external matters. She had just turned on the laptop when the phone placed on the study table suddenly rang. Jinwan saw that it was an unfamiliar number and reached out to pick it up. Looking at the information she had copied from the company a few days ago, she casually said, "Hello, who is it? Yesterday you came to our hospital and left in a hurry. I didn't have the time to give you the analysis results of that bottle of medicine. Miss G, when do you have time?" Qin Sighting's voice carried a hint of laziness and coldness. "The results are out so quickly? Since Miss G has given instructions, how could this Qin dare to neglect it?" Qin Sighting's voice was mild. There seemed to be a hint of a smile, but it gave off a faint sense of alienation and indifference. "You said that your father has been taking this medicine recently?" "That's right. Is there a problem with this medicine?" The other side was silent for a moment. "We'll talk about it when you come to collect the results. Dr. Qin, if it's convenient for you, I'll go now." Jinwan stood up, turning to change her clothes and leave. Chapter 66. Right now it was already the doctor's lunch break. After Jinwan arrived, she called Qin Sighting to ask if it was convenient for him before taking the elevator upstairs. When she arrived outside the consultation room, Jinwan thought there would be no one lining up at this time. However, she saw a young girl blocking the door. She was dressed in all kinds of luxury brands, and her hair was exquisitely styled. The diamonds on her nails were almost blinding. "Who are you? What are you doing in the consultation room at this time? Don't you know Dr. Qin is on his lunch break?" The young girl glanced at Jinwan with disdain. Jinwan glanced at her indifferently and ignored her. She was about to knock on the door. However, the girl suddenly reached out and slapped Jinwan's hand down. "Dr. Qin is on duty today. I thought I was the only one who knew he would be in the hospital all day. It wasn't easy for me to find an opportunity to come here and guard him. Since you're also here to block him, then let's make things clear." "Jinwan?" Her face was filled with question marks. "As for me, I'll say the ugly words first. No matter whose backdoor you used to know he'll be in the hospital today, don't try to snatch Dr. Qin from me." The girl mockingly glanced at Jinwan, who was slightly confused. She reached out to stroke her exquisite hair, the Bulgari diamond watch on her wrist sparkling. "I've been chasing this Dr. Qin for more than a year. He's about to agree to go on a date with me. This man is mine, understand?" Jinwan was speechless. Did this nouveau riche girl in front of him misunderstand something? Jinwan calmly said, "I'm sorry, I have something to discuss with Dr. Qin." When the girl heard the last few words, she immediately blocked the door, blocking it tightly. Her eyes were filled with caution. "Discuss something? What did you come to the hospital to discuss? If you're not here to see a doctor, then you're definitely here to harass Dr. Qin. Go away, go away. This has nothing to do with you." Jinwan silently raised her brows. Who on earth was harassing Dr. Qin? "I advise you to give up. Dr. Qin is the young master of the Qin Group. A woman like you who has no money and wears counterfeit goods is not good enough for him. If you get kicked out, you'll be the only one who will be embarrassed. What's more, I really don't want to nag at you, but that pair of police shoes of yours is the only thing worth a bit of money. Anything I wear on a regular basis is more expensive than your shoes. I advise you to give up." As the girl spoke, she glanced at Jinwan disdainfully from head to toe, barely estimating that Jinwan's status was not high. Jinwan didn't want to argue with a little girl she didn't know, nor did she take her seriously. Right now, she was in a hurry to get the analysis results of her father's medicine. Being blocked like this, she was still a little unhappy. They had always known that Qin Siding had no lack of suitors, but they did not expect there to be such a weirdo. She glanced expressionlessly at the girl's smug expression. Apart from LV, Armani, Bulgari, and branded shoes that cost thousands of dollars, what else do you know? The girl sneered. Why do you care what I know? In any case, I can afford it. As she spoke, she glanced at Jean Wan from head to toe again. She saw that Jean Wan's clothes did not have any brand logos, but they seemed to be from a big brand. She firmly believed that what she was wearing was some international imitation. All of a sudden, the door to the consultation room opened. The moment Qin Siding's figure appeared, the girl turned her eyes agitatedly. She had a love-struck expression, as though she could not wait to pounce on him. Qin Siding appeared to be smiling, but his voice was cold. In this Hai Cheng, a woman who dares to compete with Miss Ji in terms of wealth, how blind are they? The girl's eyes trembled. She sensed that Dr. Qin and the others should know each other. Her expression immediately grew alarmed. What Miss Ji? Which Miss Ji? How would I know which slum she came from, Miss Ji? Qin Siding calmly glanced at Jean Wan, calmly saying, which other Miss Ji could it be that requires me to personally welcome her? The girl's gaze was dazed as though she had yet to react. Do you know Diamond Forever? Qin Siding's gaze landed on the bag in Jean Wan's hands. He was indifferent as usual, unwilling to even glance at the girl by the side. Or rather, after he opened the door, he really did not even glance at her. Diamond Forever, what is that? The moment the girl heard the English words, her head swelled. Her pronunciation was awkward as she asked. Qin Siding coldly smiled. This bag of hers is enough to buy your entire cloakroom. Ah, don't joke around. My cloakroom is very expensive. If you add up all the clothes, without at least 1,000,000 or 800,000 yuan, you really can't compare to me. Qin Siding appeared as though he did not hear her words. He only glanced at Jean Wan, who had been standing there silently. He turned to the side and opened up a path, indicating for her to enter. He didn't plan to waste any more time talking to people who were unrelated to him. Jean Wan politely nodded at him and directly entered. Seeing that Qin Siding was not looking at her and that he seemed to be about to close the door, the girl hurriedly leaned against the door to stop him from closing it. Her eyes were fixed on him. Dr. Qin. I like you. From the first time I saw you, I liked you. A year ago when I was hospitalized, you said we weren't close, but now I've been chasing after you for a whole 14 months. We should be very familiar with each other now, right? Can you give me a chance? Even if it's just to try dating first. I really like you. I love you. Had she accidentally stumbled upon a confession scene? Jean Wan turned back to take a look. She stood in the consultation room and quietly took a step to the side. She tried her best to act as though this matter did not concern her and quietly watched the show. Following the girl's expectant and anxious gaze, her gaze landed on the man standing coldly in front of the white door. The doctor's white robe he wore was clean and spotless. His brows were indifferent, and his thin lips seemed to be carrying a slight smile. Although he was clearly smiling, it appeared as though he did not place the other party in his eyes at all. His frivolous smile appeared even colder. At this time, it was the hospital staff's lunch break. Some doctors and nurses were passing by in the hallway. When they heard the commotion, their gazes all simultaneously turned in this direction. The man was cold and indifferent. When he turned around, his slender legs paced with indifference. As though he had not heard anything, he returned to the consultation room. Chapter 67. Qin Siding single-handedly retrieved the stethoscope from the pocket of his white coat and tossed it onto the medical equipment rack by the side. He glanced back and lazily lifted his eyelids. His thin lips curved into an indifferent smile. I don't like you. Let alone 14 months, even if you wait for 14 years in front of my hospital, I still won't like you. The girl's gaze immediately dimmed. Her earlier arrogance and confidence also crumbled. She bit her lips unwillingly, her eyes reddening. Last year I almost died. It was you who saved my life. When I was pushed into the operating room, didn't you say that you liked obedient and well-behaved girls? That's why I've always listened to you. When I was discharged, you said that you don't like girls who cry, so I didn't cry. Why don't you like me? I've worked so hard to become the way you like me. In the operating room, to stabilize the patient's emotions, any gentle words are equivalent to half an anesthetic. Qin Siding's tone was cold. He did not even glance at the other party's hurt expression. His tone was cold and unhurried. I've saved many women from the gates of hell. From 80-year-old women to 1-year-old baby girls who have just learned how to speak, every single one of them knows how to be quiet and obedient. I treat all of my patients equally. Could it be that I like all of them? The girl's earlier domineering attitude changed. Her eyes reddened and she bit her lips as though she was about to cry. Jin Wan silently thought that a person like Qin Siding was indeed not someone that any woman could hold on to. When he was warm he was a smiling fox. When he was cold to the bones. She could not understand him at all. She really could not understand. Mo Jingshan and Qin Siding were both cold, noble and unapproachable. How could two people who were so easily awkward become best friends? The girl held back her tears. I am different from them. You said that you don't like yes-men girls, so I worked hard to change myself. I know that your family background is illustrious, and not just any woman can match up to you. Although my family isn't considered wealthy, we still have business dealings with the Qin Corporation. I thought that we could. The doctors and nurses who were watching outside the door all had different expressions. Some were sympathetic, some were contemptuous, and some didn't take it as big news at all. After all, Dr. Qin had been chased to the hospital by all kinds of girls. It was not a matter of a day or two. Ignoring the various gazes around him, Qin Siding was finally willing to give the girl a look, but it was cold and silent. It's been so long and you've been rejected by me countless times. Can't you see the truth? I don't like you. No matter what you become, I won't like you. His voice was cold and heartless. There was no warmth in it, nor was there any sympathy. The girl bit her lips, her heart instantly freezing into an ice cave. She finally understood. Last year when she was here she was his patient and he was her attending doctor. He could be responsible for her health, and he could smile gently and soothe her nervousness and fear. Apart from being a doctor and a patient, there was nothing between them. For so long she had been blocked outside the door so many times. She had never had the chance to get close to him. Finally, I almost got to walk into his consultation room today, but before she walked in she finally received the most heartless answer. Then do you like her? You let her into your consultation room. Is it because you like her? The girl suddenly pointed at Jin Wan who was standing inside. Jin Wan was instantly frightened. Hey, she wasn't going to take the blame for this. She had never been familiar with Qin Siding, not even in her previous life. She wasn't even clear about Qin Siding's personal feelings. They were people from two completely different worlds. Was this person in front of her provoked? She dared to say anything? Allowing her into his consultation room during lunchtime meant that he liked her? Did she think Qin Siding was crazy or a love saint? As a doctor, he definitely wouldn't be so senseless. Dr. Qin. If you like her style, I can also change myself into her style. I really like you. Qin Siding had completely lost his patience. He raised his long arm and directly closed the door, blocking the girl outside. Excuse me. He calmly glanced at Jin Wan who was still standing in the consultation room. Jin Wan raised her brows and only smiled. She teased, Are all the girls who come to the hospital to chase after you like this? Qin Siding did not speak more. He directly walked to the desk, pulled open the drawer, and handed her an A4-sized paper bag. Seeing that he did not mention it, Jin Wan did not ask any more. She did not take the matter that had nothing to do with her seriously. She walked over and reached out to receive it. The contents of this medicine. The medicine you gave me after being analyzed by a few pharmaceutical experts I have a good relationship with, they don't contain any harmful ingredients. Qin Siding's hand reached into his trouser pocket, calmly saying, If you have the opportunity to obtain the medicine he took at the same time, send it over. I'll check the contents of the other medicines before making a conclusion. Jin Wan's heart had just relaxed when she instantly heard something else. You mean? Qin Siding raised his brows. If this medicine is taken alone, it can only be considered a medicine that soothes the intestines and clears internal heat. However, it is also very special. If it is mixed with other medicines that are incompatible with it, it will have the opposite effect and cause chronic organ failure. Currently there are no other medicines here. Without the final analysis, everything can only be guessed. When Jin Wan walked out of the hospital, she suddenly felt a gaze on her. She turned to see the girl who had failed in her confession earlier. Her mascara was smeared all over her face as she sat on the bench outside the hospital. Her expression was filled with shock as she stared at the bag in her hands. Seeing her gaze, Jin Wan knew exactly what she was shocked about. She did not pay any more attention to this small incident and turned to leave. In truth, she had not carried this bag for a long time. Previously, when she fell into the water, her previous bag was soaked to the point where it could no longer be used. When she left in a hurry, Auntie Chen helped her find this bag and Jean Wan continued to use it. The girl sat on the bench, holding onto her phone as she stared at Jean Wan's departing figure. She stared blankly for a long time before lowering her head in disbelief at the image of Diamond Forever that she had just found on Baidu. The so-called Diamond Forever was Chanel's classic handbag. Adorned with 334 small diamonds, it was the epitome of luxury and low profile. There were only 13 of them in the entire world, and it was the pinnacle of limited edition handbags. 2 years ago, the 14th Diamond Forever was born. It was rumored to be a gift from Hai Cheng's Ji family's eldest miss on her 18th birthday. Her father, Ji Hongwen, had given it to her. Chanel had specially customized a Diamond Forever for Miss Ji as a coming-of-age gift. This matter had been discussed for a long time in the upper-class fashion circle. Thus, that bag could not only buy her entire cloakroom, it was worth 1.59 million yuan. Chapter 68. Aolan International was not far from here, and it was only a few minutes' walk back. In the morning, Mo Jingshan had personally treated her stomach. Now that she invited her husband out for lunch, it was a form of reciprocation. However, she did not know if he was busy at this time. When she reached the top floor of the company, she stepped out of the elevator and did not expect to see Mo Jingshan walking out of his office. Their gazes directly met. His tall and slender body formed a long shadow on the floor in front of the office. He was handsome, and his dark gray shirt wrapped around his slender upper body. His collar was unbuttoned, and there was a small piece of black gauze covering his collarbone. His skin tone was just right, and the man's face was noble and cold, gentle and calm. The moment he saw Jean Wan, Mo Jingshan unhurriedly raised his handsome brows. His cold and indifferent eyes were mixed with a hint of gentleness, and his lips curved slightly. It was a faint smile. It had only been 2 hours since they last saw each other. Why was it that when she saw his slight smile, her heart wanted to jump out? Could it be that when she saw Qin Siding's warm appearance in the hospital, she was frostbitten as a bystander? Now that she saw Mo Jingshan, she wanted to rush over to warm up? Jean Wan walked over. Just as she was about to speak, Mo Jingshan shifted his gaze away. He spoke to the woman dressed in a white collar suit by his side. The plan will be as we discussed earlier. If there are any problems, contact me. The woman by his side smiled elegantly. All right, CMO. After speaking, the woman walked toward the elevator. When she passed by Jean Wan, she politely smiled at her. Jean Wan knew that there was no shortage of men or women in all the departments of Mo Corporation, so it was not strange to see such an attractive woman in his company, but she still couldn't help turning her head to take another look at her. This woman had a very unique temperament. She was more confident and beautiful. She was around 22 or 23 years old, and when she walked by, there was a light fragrance. It was the scent of a high-end yet low-profile French perfume. It was very tasteful. What attracted Jean Wan's attention was this woman's identity. Secretary, CEO's secretary. The elevator door opened and closed. Jean Wan originally wanted to invite the great CEO Mo for lunch, but the words that came out of her mouth were, "Wasn't your secretary's position empty a while ago? When did you get a new secretary? I didn't hear about it." As soon as she finished speaking, Mo Jingshan had already turned to open the office door behind him. He naturally pulled Jean Wan closer to him and let her in. "A few days ago, when I was not in the country, I transferred a secretary from Shine Group in the US. The positions of the company's executives and senior secretaries will not be vacant for too long, so it is not surprising that the Mo family directly transferred someone from Shine." Jean Wan was silent for a moment and did not speak immediately. "What's wrong?" he asked in a low voice with a warm expression. "Nothing, I was just casually asking. After all, I suddenly found out that a very beautiful and outstanding woman had appeared by my husband's side. I can't just pretend that I didn't see it." Mo Jingshan watched her meaningfully. "Are you jealous?" "No, absolutely not." He chuckled and pinched her face. "Mrs. Mo is the most beautiful woman in Haicheng. Now you're standing here praising another woman's beauty. Are you jealous?" Jean Wan frowned. He could even see through this. It was clearly just a work relationship, but earlier, when the secretary smiled at her, she felt strangely uncomfortable. "You're the boss and she's the subordinate. I was just casually saying." Jean Wan was stubborn. She turned to escape from his embrace. Mo Jingshan did not allow her to move away. He brought her to the back of the office table and carried her to sit on his lap. His hand patted her waist from time to time, and his lips carried an indistinct smile. No matter how she looked at it, it seemed like he was using his gaze to tease her, whose entire body was filled with jealousy. "Why did you come to the company at this time? Why didn't you rest more at home?" His voice was clear, and his calm tone became much gentler under this warm embrace. "I just went to Dr. Chin to retrieve the drug test results and passed by here on my way back. I wanted to treat the great CEO Mo to a hot pot." Jean Wan explained her intentions, purposely ignoring the fact that he wanted her to rest more at home. Although her legs were indeed weak when she woke up in the morning, it was not to the extent that she would not be able to leave the house after a few hours of rest. It was just that she had been suppressed by him for too long last night and was easily fatigued today. "What's the result?" "The medicine that I sent didn't show any abnormalities, but it can't be completely conclusive. When I pass by the G home, I'll find a chance to check for other medicines." As Jean Wan spoke, she glanced at the time. Her eyelids rose, and her voice carried a hint of jealousy. "Have you eaten lunch? Do you want to give me some face and accompany me to eat hot pot?" Mo Jingshan rubbed her head, messing up her hair. He softly said with a smile that was not a smile, "Your gaze is filled with displeasure. If I don't give you this face, won't I not even be able to sleep on the bed tonight? Even if you give me this face, you're still not allowed to sleep with me tonight." Jean Wan pretended to be slightly angry. "Is there even a day for me to rest? I haven't had a good night's sleep for 2 days." Seeing her reproachful expression, Mo Jingshan's heart moved. He held the back of her head and lowered his head to kiss her. It was only a kiss that stopped halfway, but Jean Wan almost jumped up in his embrace. She rushed to pull back, and when he kissed her again, she softly said, "This is your office." Office, so what?" He seemed to be purposely provoking her. When Jean Wan glared at him, he still kissed her twice on the lips. Seeing her angry expression, he continued kissing her. Earlier on, Jean Wan had heard the sounds of people passing by the door. Even though the CEO's office was located on the top floor of the MO Corporation, and the secretary's office and assistant's office were on the lower floor, it was inevitable that employees would come to the top floor. This was a public area. She tensed her body. As his kiss deepened, she suddenly opened her mouth and bit down. Mo Jingshan's black eyes watched her sensitive and embarrassed expression. He smiled by her lips, caressing the long hair behind her head. He warmly whispered by her lips, "Do you know, when you're shy, it's even harder for a man to control himself." Jean Wan's lips were pressed against his. She glared at him. "What I said last night was right. After you started eating, you really don't know how to control yourself. If I didn't know how to control myself, do you think you would have the ability to leave today?" Chapter 69. Jean Wan pushed against his chest with both hands. When she heard someone passing by the door, she softly changed the topic. "I saw that there's a newly opened hot pot restaurant downstairs. There are a few nearby as well. Can you eat spicy food?" Mo Jingshan released her. When Jean Wan stood up from his embrace, his hand remained on her waist. He did not let her walk too far away and kept her by his side. "My preferences for food are very simple. I'm not picky." Jean Wan originally wanted to challenge the newly opened hot pot restaurant with Mo Jingshan. However, after considering her stomach, she gave up. "Then let's eat the traditional charcoal hot pot. I'm not sure if there will be many people at this time. I'll make a call to reserve a place." She picked up her phone and was about to check the number of the hot pot restaurant near the company. Her finger had just tapped on the screen when the internal line on the office table suddenly rang. Mo Jingshan casually pressed it. Shen Mu's voice came through the phone. "CEO Mo the Elder is here." Mo Jingshan did not expect his grandfather to suddenly come here. After a moment of silence, he calmly asked, "He's already up?" "Yes, the elevator should be reaching the top floor soon." The internal line was hung up. Mo Jingshan turned to see that Jean Wan, who was about to make a reservation earlier, suddenly ran to the side. She circled behind the black leather sofa in the office and then behind the desk. "What are you doing?" "Grandfather Mo is here. I haven't seen him for so long. If he sees that I'm disturbing your work in your office, he will definitely be unhappy. It's going to be his birthday soon. Before that, I'd better not leave a bad impression on him." Jean Wan looked around as she spoke. "I have to find a place to hide." Mo Jingshan sighed with a smile. There was a trace of playfulness in his eyes. "When he sees you, he can't be happier. How could he be unhappy? How could Jean Wan listen to him?" She heard movement outside the door. It sounded like there was a walking stick walking on the ground, approaching. Her gaze shifted to the wide office desk in front of Mo Jingshan. She subconsciously rushed over and hid under the desk under Mo Jingshan's eyes. Mo Jingshan saw the way she crouched down and his gaze darkened. The door opened. Although the Mo family had been prosperous for generations, Elder Mo had joined the army when he was young and had the experience of resisting the United States and aiding Korea. With his military rank, even after he retired from the business world, he still had a domineering temper. In his grandson's company, he did not need anyone to lead the way. When they reached the office, he did not even make a sound and directly pushed the door open. The moment the door opened, Jin Wan raised her hand and made a shu gesture to him. Mo Jingshan, I just came over and heard from Shinmu that Jin Wan was here. Why don't I see her? Grandfather Mo's voice was old but dignified as he walked in. Separated by the office desk, his voice came closer and closer. Jin Wan rubbed her forehead. She didn't notice Shinmu when she arrived. As the CEO's assistant, Shinmu had never been a blabbermouth. When did he find out that she was here? He actually told Grandfather Mo directly. Now that she had already hidden herself, if she were to come out again, the situation would be too awkward. Jin Wan hesitated for a moment. She shrunk under the office desk and did not move. She raised her eyes and looked at Mo Jingshan with a pleading expression. She then clasped her hands together and stared at him. Mo Jingshan glanced at the woman under the office desk. The corners of his lips lifted faintly. She just came. She has already left. Mo Jingshan lied so calmly that even Jin Wan could not help but want to give him a thumbs up. After all, she was currently squatting in front of him. In such a situation, he could still maintain his composure as though she did not exist. If it were her, she would definitely be so embarrassed that she would not be able to maintain her composure. At the very least, she would not be able to maintain her inner peace. This brat, she came quickly and left quickly. Elder Mo harumphed, leaning on his walking stick as he approached the office desk. This weekend, bring Jin Wan back to the Mo family? This weekend was Elder Mo's 80th birthday. It was clear that the elder had not seen his granddaughter-in-law for a long time and was worried that he would not be able to see her during the birthday celebration. Thus, he directly came to check on the situation. Mo Jingshan smiled faintly. For the past half a year, you've been keeping an eye on the Yu Garden's movements. Although you don't know our situation like the back of your hand, you should know that our relationship as husband and wife is no longer as distant as before. Of course, she will be there for your birthday celebration. Hearing Mo Jingshan's words, Elder Mo appeared to have swallowed a tranquilizer. He nodded. All right. That's good. In the blink of an eye, Elder Mo raised his brows and reprimanded, What do you mean by I've been keeping an eye on the Yu Garden's movements? Xiaoqin saw that the two of you are so close. It's only right for her to report to me. After being married for so long, I haven't seen any movements from the Ji family's brat's stomach. I'm an 80-year-old man and even in my dreams, I want to hug a great-grandchild. You brat, you completely don't understand the feelings of someone with half a foot in the grave. Jin Wan silently scolded. No wonder Auntie Chen was so concerned about their relationship. It turned out that Elder Mo had placed her as a spy. Thankfully, Auntie Chen was Grandfather Mo's person. If it were some other spy with unclear motives, Mo Jingshan most likely would not have allowed her to stay in the Yu Garden for so long. Mo Jingshan only coldly glanced at Elder Mo. He casually played with the fountain pen on the office desk. The tip of the pen paused on the table as he opened his mouth. His tone was extremely mild. 80 years old and you can still use your walking stick to chase after thieves all over the world. I think you won't be able to enter the grave even after another 20 years. Mentioning his achievement of catching a thief on the street 2 months ago, Elder Mo's bright and spirited eyes were filled with pride. That's right, if you don't hurry up and give me a great-grandchild, if I'm not around in 20 years, how are you going to find a wife for my great-grandchild? Jin Wan, who was under the office desk. Mo Jingshan coldly glanced at him. Elder Mo placed both his hands on his walking stick, his brows dancing as he said, Great-granddaughter is fine too. It doesn't matter if it's a boy or a girl. Anyway, you brat, at the very least you have to give me 2 and 3 years and 3 and 5 years. The more the better. Mo Jingshan smiled faintly. His gaze meaningfully glanced at the people under the table. Jin Wan raised her hand to cover one side of her eyes. She could not tell if she was crying or laughing. Did Grandfather Mo intend for her to give birth to a football team? And 3 and 5 years. The elder seemed to have reached the climax of his speech and did not seem to have any intention of ending the topic. Jin Wan took out her phone to look at the time. It was already 1 o'clock. Lunch break had already passed. She did not know if she could still eat this hot pot. Recently, there have been quite a number of relatives rushing over to the Mo family. Why do you have the free time to go out? Mo Jingshan casually asked. Elder Mo snorted. Relatives? Which one of them wasn't a distant relative who was thick-skinned enough to insist on being related to the Mo family? This old man's birthday celebration is just for fun, so I let them be. My old comrade is passing by Hai Ching today and invited me for tea. I'm just taking the chance to walk around and enjoy some peace. There was a knock on the office door. Mo Jingshan calmly said, "Come in." Jinwan could not tell who it was from under the table, but she vaguely heard the sound of high heels landing on the floor. "Co-Mo, the documents for this morning's meeting have been prepared. There's also the finance department's monthly report. They've sent it to the secretary's office. I brought it over." This voice was gentle and sweet, gentle and calm. Chapter 70. Elder Mo's voice paused at the same time. His voice changed direction as though he was looking back at the person who had just entered. "You are in Shuyan?" Elder Mo asked. Secretary N politely and respectfully nodded toward Elder. "Hello, Grandfather Mo. It's been a few years since we last met. You seem to be in good health." Elder Mo smiled and nodded. "The last time I saw you, was it in America? 2 days ago, I heard that you had returned to the country. I didn't expect it to be true. Are your father and grandfather well?" Secretary N smiled. "They are all well, but my grandfather is not as healthy as you. You don't look like you're 80 years old. If you say you're 60 years old, many people will believe you." "Aha, this child still knows how to talk. AI, this granddaughter of the N family has already grown up. Time really doesn't wait." Elder Mo enjoyed these words very much. He was in a good mood as he smiled. "You've been working in America's Shine for more than a year. I heard that you've always done well in your work. You handle things strictly and decisively. You're also a Harvard graduate. Why did your uncle Mo suddenly transfer you back to the country? And you even entered Jingshan's company?" Secretary N maintained an appropriate smile. "This is Uncle Mo's intention. Although Mo Corporation is not part of the Mo family's company system, it is still the most influential company in the country. Anywhere is a good training. Since Uncle Mo wants me to return, I'll directly come over." "Oh? Your Uncle Mo's intention?" Elder Mo's tone suddenly became lighter. There was a slight pause. Secretary N nodded. "When I came to the company to report, CO Mo was in England on a business trip. Uncle Mo arranged for me to come in, so I was able to skip a few procedures with the HR department. I only had the chance to meet CEO Mo yesterday afternoon." Jinwan could hear that this new secretary named In Shuyan seemed to be very familiar with the Mo family. Their relationship was not bad. But she said she was sent back by Uncle Mo. Uncle Mo? Which Uncle Mo could there be in Shine Group? Mo Jingshan's parents had not been in the country for many years. Shine Group had always been managed by Mo Jingshan's father Mo Xiaoza. Half a year ago, when they got married, only Mo Jingshan's mother had specially flown back to personally visit this daughter-in-law. Mo Xiaoza had not even met her face. Hence, the Uncle Mo that Secretary N was referring to, and the Uncle Mo that she was so familiar with, should be Mo Xiaoza. To specially send the daughter of a family friend back to the country and to Mo Jingshan's side, wasn't the meaning of this too obvious? Jinwan raised her eyes to look at Mo Jingshan, who had been quietly sitting behind the desk without interrupting. Sensing Jinwan's fiery gaze, Mo Jingshan's gaze subtly shifted to the bottom of the table. His brows were deep and calm. It was impossible to tell what thoughts and plans he had for this secretary who was forced into his position. When they first got married, Grandfather Mo was the one who insisted on Jinwan marrying into his family. He was also the one who doted on and protected Jinwan the most in the Mo family, but Mo Jingshan's father never showed up. She didn't know if he was too busy at Shine or had other thoughts. Now, with a woman's keen perception, she realized that Mo Jingshan's father had never acknowledged her as his daughter-in-law. Elder Mo chatted with Secretary N for a while longer, but Jinwan did not hear much of what they talked about. She kept looking at Mo Jingshan from the bottom of the table. Mo Jingshan only listened to their conversation, his expression indifferent and not saying a single word. Finally, Secretary N took her leave because she still had work to do. Elder Mo stood in the office quietly before suddenly asking, "Jingshan, what do you think?" Mo Jingshan coldly curved his lips. "What do you mean, what do you mean? Your father is intentionally going against me. He clearly knows that Jinwan has already married into our family for so long, yet he still refuses to give up and insists on marrying this lass in Shuyan to you." Elder Mo's tone was slightly displeased. Right now he even brazenly sent her over from America. It's clear that he doesn't have any regard for the granddaughter-in-law I've set my eyes on. Although this lass from the Yin family isn't bad and I've seen her a few times when she was young, you've always had no interest in this in Shu Yen. You're neither cold nor indifferent, so I've never planned on forcing you on this matter. Elder Mo sighed. I hope that last Jinwan doesn't know about this. Otherwise, if she thinks too much, I might not be able to hold my great-grandson in a short period of time. Mo Jingshin's brows moved. He gave a light, meaningful smile. He was sitting right under the table. How could he not know? Jinwan, she was indeed thinking about it, but she was not thinking about the negative aspects. It was just a secretary sent over from America. It wasn't like she was sent to Mo Jingshin's bed. Even if she was sent to his bed, it was uncertain if he would even be willing to sleep with her. What was there for her to think about? I have to go back and give your father a call. He must be getting old and thinks that his wings have hardened. He can even disregard the granddaughter-in-law I've set my eyes on. I have to scold him properly. Elder Mo walked out with his walking stick. He did not even turn his head back in anger. Mo Jingshin did not stop him. He curved his lips. The moment the office regained its silence, he glanced at the little woman who slowly crawled out from under the table. How's the air down there? Mo Jingshin casually sat on the leather chair behind the office table. He lazily leaned back and loosened his collar. His eyes carried a hint of a smile. After Jinwan crawled out, she stood up and said stubbornly, "This office table of yours is definitely made of high-quality wood. There's no smell of glue or formaldehyde at all. Not bad, not bad." Mo Jingshin raised his brows slightly. That's it. What else? Jinwan raised a hand to tidy up her clothes that were slightly messy from her earlier actions. She could not possibly say that earlier, when she was under the table, every time she raised her head, the first thing she saw was Mo Jingshin's legs. His sitting posture could not be considered reserved. It was calm and casual. He did not cross his legs but casually spread them apart. His legs were long and firm, but every time she raised her head, the first thing that entered her eyes was the place between his legs. Seeing Jinwan's wandering gaze, Mo Jingshin chuckled lightly. Why are you hiding so far away? Come here. Jinwan tugged on her coat but did not go over. Mo Jingshin stood up and approached her. He looked down at the little woman who was shorter than him by more than a head. Do you mind now? If I said I don't mind, would you believe me? Not thinking too much about it did not mean he did not mind. His dark, calm eyes watched her expression of wanting to be rational but unable to suppress her emotions. He raised a hand and pinched her snow-white ear that was not wearing any earrings. Jinwan trembled involuntarily. Chapter 71. Mo Jingshin's tone was low and mild. Secretary and was directly transferred here from America by my father. Regardless of the reason for her transfer, or the seriousness and professionalism of her work, there is nothing to be picky about. Jinwan mildly curved her lips, but her smile did not reach her eyes. Grandfather Mo said that she is very outstanding. It seems like it's true. Even you can't find any flaws in her. Right now, shouldn't I feel a sense of danger? Mo Jingshin gently tapped her forehead with his finger. The entire office is filled with the scent of your jealousy. Her contact here is limited to work-related matters. In the company, aside from official business, we won't see each other more than once. Jinwan really wanted to say that she was not being petty, but his father's intention of placing her here was clear. She could not just ignore it. I'm not being jealous, but Mr. Mo, I have to make things clear. Jinwan's tone was cold and she appeared even calmer. Since I'm Mrs. Mo, I won't easily give up my position to any woman. I'm also very clear about this. After all, Grandfather Mo has said that the elders have long wanted to force that surname into your hands. However, you've always had no interest in her. Since you were previously uninterested based on your personality in the next few decades, you won't have any interest in her that you shouldn't have. Mo Jingshin did not speak, silently watching her. However, it was not hard to see that his mood was quite good because of her words. But even if I'm clear about this secretary and is not a simple secretary. Every day in your company, whether it's work, meetings, business trips, or social engagements, you two will inevitably come into contact. There will be knots in my heart, and as time passes, my thoughts will run wild. It will affect my emotions and affect my trust in you as well as my judgment. After saying this, Jinwan directly turned to leave. I'll only say this. In the future, I won't say a single word about this matter. I'm hungry. Let's go eat hot pot. Mo Jingshan watched as Jin Wan appeared to say, "This great aunt will leave my words here today." He could not help but laugh. She was really free and easy. Jin Wan was about to leave the office. She did not care if he had the time to accompany her to eat. All of a sudden, her hand was gripped by a strong force. In the next second she was pulled back, almost falling into the man's embrace. She subconsciously tried to steady herself, but Mo Jingshan pressed her into his embrace, not giving her any room to retreat. His lips curled into a smile. "Look at your half-angry look. It's not entirely a good thing to be rational over willfulness. Why don't you vent your anger on me?" "I don't have a temper. He's so outstanding. How could I have a temper?" Jin Wan looked away from him. In the end, Mo Jingshan could not help but laugh. He rubbed her small mocking face. "I don't plan on keeping her for long." Jin Wan glanced at him. "How long is not long?" Secretary and is highly regarded in the eyes of the elders of both families. Her relationship with the Mo family and my relationship with her meant that we couldn't chase her away so quickly. Give me 2 weeks and I'll definitely give you a satisfactory answer. Jin Wan was expressionless. "My relationship with you? She actually likes you, doesn't she? Otherwise she wouldn't have returned to the country so obediently. After all, Shine is the Mo family's true foundation. Her development there will be better. Coming here can only mean that her goal is you." Jin Wan suddenly thought of her past life. The 10 years he had left. At that time, Mo Jingshan had already become the true owner of Shine in America. With a flip of his hand he could summon clouds and rain. During those years did this secretarian have any contact with him? Thinking of this, her originally calm heart began to churn. Rationality told her that she could not be dissatisfied over such a matter, but her emotions were still swayed. She pursed her lips and moved to push him away, saying, "I'm hungry. I want to go eat." "Let go." In the end, not only was she unable to move away from his embrace, she even took several steps back. By the time she reacted, her back was already pressed against the office door. The hand that was previously wrapped around her waist was now pressed against the door behind her ear. Jin Wan's heart instantly shrank, but she tried to raise her voice to maintain her bottom line. She angrily said, "Mo Jingshan, what are you doing?" "I'm hungry. I want to go eat. If you don't have time, I'll go myself." "I'm just making things clear. I can't just watch you walk out angrily." Mo Jingshan lowered his head to look at her face. He calmly said, "Your emotions are unstable. If I don't act like this, how can I talk to you? I don't need you to say anything to me. Earlier, didn't you ask me to give you 2 weeks' time? If I don't object, that means I've already agreed. What else do you want to say?" Right now, Jin Wan did not want to speak to him so closely. "My wife is you now and will only be you in the future." His tone was cold and calm, but it was serious that could not be ignored. Jin Wan immediately fell silent. She pursed her lips and looked at him. Mo Jingshan saw that she was clearly aggrieved but was unwilling to reveal it. He sighed softly and leaned down to kiss her lips. He stopped by her lips and said hoarsely, "Mrs. Mo, although jealousy means that you care about me, if you feel aggrieved because of this, my heart will ache." Jin Wan glared at him. She thought to herself, "Since your heart aches for me, you actually want me to endure it for 2 whole weeks?" Mo Jingshan suddenly chuckled lowly, speaking softly against her lips. 1 week in? Jin Wan? Did this man really know how to read minds? However, Jin Wan was not someone so unreasonable. 1 week it is. We've agreed for these few days, you're not allowed to have any physical contact with her. Even if she hands you a document during a meeting, your hands are not allowed to touch. Mo Jingshan could not help but laugh. All right. Jin Wan finally softened in front of him and no longer resisted. Not angry anymore? He asked softly. I wasn't angry in the first place. Jin Wan remained stubborn. Mo Jingshan smiled. Let's go. Go where? Aren't we going to eat hot pot? Jin Wan was bewildered. It's already past 1:30. It's working hours. Isn't that bad? I'm the boss. Who dares to say no? Although she said this, Jin Wan still shifted her gaze away from the door. She watched as Mo Jingshan picked up his suit jacket and walked over. A small knot in her heart immediately blurted out, that secretarian, does she really like you? Perhaps I didn't pay much attention. What kind of reply was this? Isn't the Mo family very close to her family? Haven't you known each other for many years? Chapter 72. Walking out of the office, Jin Wan was still wondering if grandfather Mo and Mo Jingshan's father would have a fierce battle soon. She also did not know who would win the battle of granddaughter-in-law between the father and son. However, it seemed like the key to victory rested on Mo Jingshan. Just as she was thinking, Mo Jingshan suddenly held her wrist and walked toward the elevator. She glanced at a female employee who was passing by. She was currently looking in their direction with envy and surprise. Wasn't it too high profile to display their affection in the company? Jin Wan rushed to pull her hand back, but Mo Jingshan tightened his grip on her hand, not giving her a chance to escape. Just as they were about to reach the private elevator, she could vaguely see the female employee holding her chest and muttering. However, she could not hear what they were muttering about. How would she know that anyone in the company who saw this scene would definitely be shocked? In the company, it was not an exaggeration to say that CEO Mo was a cold-faced demon. The employees were all trembling with fear, afraid that they would make the slightest mistake in front of CEO Mo. After all, Mo Corporation was not a good place to stay. No one could casually spend their days here. In the company, CEO Mo never had such a patient and warm side. He would not easily fly into a rage, but he was definitely not easy to talk to. In everyone's hearts, aside from being cold, there was only coldness. But who would have thought that CEO Mo would actually dote on his wife so much? Earlier, when CEO Mo had looked at Jin Wan with a gentle smile, it had really taken her life. CEO Mo, just as the private elevator stopped at the top floor before the door opened, Secretary An's voice suddenly came from the side. Jin Wan heard that voice and subconsciously turned to look at her. Secretary An's gaze was fixed on Mo Jingshan. Mo Jingshan did not turn back. His voice was light and clear. "What is it?" "You have a meeting with DC Corporation CEO at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, head to the meeting room to listen to the Finance Department's monthly report." "Are you heading out now? Then do you need me to move your afternoon schedule to tomorrow?" And Shuyan's eyes did not blink as she watched Mo Jingshan. In this short period of time, she did not even glance at Jin Wan once. Mo Jingshan's tone was mild. "The meeting with DC will be moved to tomorrow morning. I'll return to the company before 4. And Shuyan's expression did not change, but she reminded him softly, "But CEO Mo, the CEO of DC Group has already made an appointment with you for more than a month. It wasn't easy to get his approval, and today he can finally discuss with you personally," Jin Wan said in a low voice that only he could hear. "If you have something to do in the afternoon, go ahead. I just mentioned the hot pot casually. It's not like I have to eat it." As soon as she finished speaking, he squeezed her palm without batting an eyelid. Her hand was held in his palm. Jin Wan did not say anything more. Secretary An had described his busy afternoon in such detail. She wouldn't believe it if she didn't purposely let her hear it. Although the secretary was only a secretary, Mo Jingshan was the person in charge of the company. He knew how to handle everything. If Mo Jingshan didn't think it was necessary to give that company too much face, Jin Wan didn't say much. "Mo, it's almost 2 o'clock. If you don't have anything important, you should wait for the DC people to meet before leaving." And Shuyan's tone was still formal. Her eyes were still fixed on Mo Jingshan's profile. Mo Jingshan's expression was natural and normal. His tone was mild. "Jin Wan is hungry. We can't wait." It was a very casual attitude. Jin Wan silently chuckled. She really wanted to pinch him. She wasn't a reincarnated hungry ghost. Who said she couldn't wait? She narrowed her eyes and did not say anything. She did not pinch him, nor did she look at Secretary N. She only used her fingernails to secretly dig into his palm, but it only made him grip her even tighter. And Shuyan paused. Her expression was calm as she slowly nodded. She then smiled slightly. "All right, I understand, Xiaomo." Ever since she was young, Mo Jingshan had always been a cold and distant man. However, this was the first time she felt that he was even more distant, even colder. The distance between them was clearly much wider than before. The two of them entered the elevator. And Shuyan watched as the doors slowly closed. She held the documents in her hands and was silent for a long time. Her expression did not change as she turned to leave. "She seems to be an opponent, ah." Jin Wan stood in the elevator by Mo Jingshan's side. She casually and softly said this. Mo Jingshan glanced at her. "She's very calm," Jin Wan commented. It was the calmness of someone who was determined to win over Mo Jingshan. It was the calmness of someone who did not place Jin Wan's existence in her eyes at all. It was so calm that it triggered Jin Wan's small desire to win. She raised her hand to hold onto Mo Jingshan's arm, saying firmly, "But no matter how outstanding or confident some people are, they can't interfere in someone else's marriage and become a third party. Mo Jingshan, no matter how many women are eyeing you, You can only be my man. Mo Jingshan chuckled softly. And your man? Jin Wan raised her eyes to look at the reflection of the mirror on the elevator door. They were standing together. The man was extraordinarily handsome. His gray shirt gave off a clear aura, and his hair appeared as though it had been washed 1,000 times in a day. He did not need to use any glue or styling, and he was already so handsome that one could not shift their eyes away. Even though he was casually standing, he appeared extremely straight. He was currently looking down at her by his side, a faint smile on his lips. The place they were going to was right below his company. The two did not drive and directly walked there. After entering the restaurant, Jin Wan asked, "Are you sure you can eat spicy food?" She could not really handle it herself, but sometimes she would feel a little greedy and really wanted to eat it. However, she did not seem to have a good understanding of Mo Jingshan's preferences. As Mrs. Mo, she was really ashamed. When Mo Jingshan entered, he gave her an unfathomable gaze. It was clear that he was slightly prejudiced against her question of common sense. Jin Wan did not speak anymore. She entered and found a place to sit down. Earlier, she did not manage to make a reservation over the phone. Thankfully, there were not many people dining here at this time. A good seat by the window on the second floor was empty. "Welcome. May I ask how many people are dining?" The waiter approached. "2 people, Jin Wan replied. Mo Jingshan did not speak and directly sat down opposite her. He received the menu from the waiter and placed it by her side without even looking at it. "Order whatever you like to eat." Seeing that the great CEO Mo did not appear to be unaccustomed to this place that was filled with the fragrance of hot pot, Jin Wan lowered her head to look at the menu. She ticked off the numbers on it and after a while, she raised her head to look at him. "Do you like to eat vegetables or meat? If it's meat, lamb or beef? Do you like duck intestines and pork tenderloin?" After asking, she saw that Mo Jingshan's disapproving gaze was directed at her. Chapter 73. Mo Jingshan's eyes swept past her face, calmly saying, "Vegetables." Jin Wan was slightly embarrassed as she marked the vegetables on the plate. She understood that Mo Jingshan preferred vegetarian food, so she ordered some other light dishes. She then handed the menu to him. "See if there's anything you want to add? I didn't order too much." Mo Jingshan received it but did not look at it, directly handing it to the waiter by the table. "What would the two of you like to drink? Do you have hot water?" "Plain water is fine too," Jin Wan asked. "Yes, we'll bring it up immediately." "Sir, what would you like to drink?" "The same." Jin Wan immediately raised her eyes to look at Mo Jingshan, silently remembering in her heart that she knew Mo Jingshan did not like milk. He also did not particularly like coffee or tea. Furthermore, like her, he had a soft spot for plain water. With such a healthy diet, she had most likely already grasped his tastes. The waiter turned to leave with the menu. Not long after, the clear soup Jin Wan had ordered was brought over. In less than a minute, steam began to rise between the two of them. "I was worried earlier that you wouldn't be used to such an environment," Jin Wan said as she received the glass pot from the waiter. Inside was warm water with lemon slices. Mo Jingshan's handsome brows moved slightly. "What do you mean?" "It's hot pot. For someone like you who usually socializes in hotels and goes to formal occasions, I don't think you have a preference for this kind of thing." "It's true that I don't have a preference, but it doesn't mean that I won't eat it." Mo Jingshan only smiled, not mocking her for deviating from the topic. "Then do you like sweet food?" Jin Wan suddenly held her face, looking at the man's handsome face through the steam. He watched her. "Are you planning to start understanding my preferences?" Jin Wan smiled calmly. "There's no helping it. Today I suddenly felt a strong sense of danger. If I don't take the initiative, my husband will be snatched away by someone else." Mo Jingshan chuckled softly. "I'm guessing that you definitely don't eat sweet food," Jin Wan muttered to herself. Previously, when he bought the glutinous rice balls for her to eat, there were many leftovers. He did not eat a single bite. The taste was too sweet. He most likely did not like it. He raised his eyebrows. She had answered correctly. After eating the hot pot to their heart's content, Jin Wan kept asking questions, to which Mo Jingshan occasionally answered and occasionally ignored. In the end, when she even asked him what color he liked, he could no longer bear it and brought this little woman, who had suddenly become inquisitive, out of the hot pot restaurant. Jin Wan stayed at home and read the company's documents and various reports for 2 days. She did not go out. In the meantime, Ji Minggran had called her twice, but she didn't pick up either of them. She pretended to be dead and ignored them. The night before Elder Mo's birthday banquet, Ji Minggran called again. Jinwan had just come out of the study. She glanced at the caller ID and picked up the call expressionlessly. Big sister, didn't you and brother Jingshin return to the Yu Garden these few days? Ji Mingran's voice was cautious. Jinwan's tone was unhurried. No, what? You went to the Imperial Garden to look for us? I had a gathering with my classmates in the afternoon and passed by the Yu Garden. I wanted to go in to look for you, but Auntie Chin said that you and brother Jingshin haven't returned to the Yu Garden recently. Passed by the Yu Garden? The Yu Garden was located in the southern part of Haicheng. It was located in a secluded location. No matter where Ji Mingran went, if she wanted to return to the Ji family, it was impossible for her to pass by the Yu Garden. Indeed, I haven't returned to stay. Your brother-in-law and I have been spending some time together. It will probably be a few days before we return to the Yu Garden, Jinwan said with a warm smile. Ji Mingran seemed to be stunned by her reply. After a moment of silence, she cautiously asked, Then where are you and brother Jingshin staying recently? I'll go look for you. Won't we be able to see each other tomorrow when we go to the Mo family? Why are you in such a rush to look for me today? Jinwan was too lazy to pretend to be passionate. Her tone was cold as she rejected, If there's anything, let's talk tomorrow. I'm still busy. I brought something good for you. Big sister, if it's convenient for you, let me go look for you. Ji Mingran was very persistent. Jinwan was silent for a moment. She wanted to see what exactly she was trying to hide. Tomorrow was Grandfather Mo's birthday banquet. For the past 2 days, Ji Mingran had been so eager to contact her. There was definitely something fishy going on. Jinwan met up with Ji Mingran at a dessert shop. From start to finish, Jinwan did not reveal where she was staying. When they arrived at the dessert shop, Ji Mingran saw Jinwan sitting by the window drinking milk tea and looking at her phone. She walked in. Jinwan pretended not to see her. Her eyes were glued to the few news articles that had just been scrolled down. She appeared to be defenseless. When Ji Mingran walked to the table, she only spoke gently and coolly, Take a seat. What exactly is the matter? She was too lazy to give Ji Mingran too much face, and there was no need for her to pretend to have a deep sisterly relationship. Ji Mingran pushed an exquisite square box toward her. Previously, didn't you say that you were going to give a chessboard to Elder Mo? I begged Dad for a long time and he finally agreed to give me this chessboard. Big sister, tomorrow you can give this to Grandfather Mo. Ji Mingran did not know that the chess record was already in her hands. Jinwan did not even raise her head, continuing to look at her phone. Her voice was cold and clear, carrying with it a distance of 1,000 miles. Grandfather Mo's birthday, you seem to be very concerned about it. Ji Mingran's expression was that of a good younger sister naturally thinking for her older sister. After all, you are my older sister and brother Jingshin treats me very well. I have to do my part for the both of you. Is that so? Jinwan placed her phone down, calmly looking at Ji Mingran. The moment their eyes met, Ji Mingran's heart trembled under her cold gaze. Big sister, recently you've really distanced yourself from me. You won't let me go to the Yu Garden, and now you won't even tell me where you're staying. What exactly are you guarding against? Jinwan glanced at the box on the table, reaching out to open it. She saw that it was indeed the jade chessboard from the early Tang dynasty that her father had kept for many years. It was actually real. As expected, it was very abnormal. Jinwan closed the box, slightly curling her fair fingers. Her knuckles seemed to carelessly knock on the glass table. Why have you been so paranoid recently? Could it be that you've really done something to let me down? Ji Mingran's originally natural expression almost froze. How could I possibly do anything to let you down? You're my sister, my biological sister. Jinwan's gaze once again returned to her phone. Her tone was light and breezy. Isn't that enough? If you haven't done anything wrong, why are you always worried? I was just asking. I was afraid that you'd be too distant with me. Since I'm thinking too much, then I won't ask anymore. Jinwan was cold and did not reply. After around 10 minutes, Ji Mingran found an excuse to leave. Chapter 74. Not long after Jinwan returned, she was still organizing the documents when she heard the door open. She stood up to see Mo Jingshin's silhouette appear by the door. It was already past 9. He had a social engagement tonight and did not drink much. Although the smell of alcohol on him was not strong, Jinwan could still smell it the moment she approached. Your social engagement ended so early? Jinwan approached to ask, casually taking the jacket he had just taken off. Mo Jingshin was about to toss the jacket to the side when he saw Jinwan's natural movements. His gaze paused on her face for a moment before he smiled and handed the jacket to her. "Mrs. Mo is home alone. I can't let you wait for too long." Every time this man's gaze landed on her, it was as though it was dyed with endless darkness. It was like the ocean in the night sky, causing one to be unable to see its bottom. However, it caused Jinwan's heart to beat faster. Especially at night when there was no one else in the house, this feeling was even more obvious. Last night, Jinwan used the excuse of reading the company's documents for an entire day to fall asleep early. No matter what, she could not let Mo Jingshin, who went to bed on time, have his way. Tonight, could she use the excuse of going to Grandfather Mo's birthday celebration tomorrow to bluff her way through for one more night? "Do you want to take a shower first?" Although the faint smell of alcohol on his body was not unpleasant, Jinwan felt that it was better for him to take a shower first. Otherwise, if he continued to stare at her like this, she would most likely be thrown onto the bed in less than 10 minutes. He was clearly a man with a gentle aura. Even the smile on his lips was filled with gentlemanly self-restraint. But who knew better than her? In bed, this man, cough. Not only did he not control himself, he would even bite. The hickeys on her body had just faded slightly. She did not want to let him have his way again. "All right." He did not reject. While he entered the bathroom to take a shower, Jinwan directly went to boil some water. Although he was not drunk, it was common for different types of alcohol to be mixed at social engagements. Even if he was not drunk, it would still hurt his stomach. She wanted to make a cup of tea to warm his stomach and sober up. Furthermore, this rare feeling of simply enjoying a world with just the two of them, to her, she really wanted to cherish it more. In the bathroom, the sound of water did not stop. Jinwan recalled that she had forgotten to bring his clothes to change earlier and turned to return to the bedroom. A few minutes later, she placed the clothes in front of the bathroom door. She knocked once. "I'll leave the clothes outside." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned to leave. However, before she could turn around, he suddenly opened the bathroom door. Jinwan's eyelids twitched. Perhaps this was not the first time she had seen such a high-definition and censored scene, but she still blushed. He was on the bed, but he suddenly stood in front of her so openly. She couldn't accept it, so she turned around and wanted to run away. Unexpectedly, Mo Jingshin suddenly reached out and pulled her back. "Ah, you're covered in water. You haven't wiped it off yet. What are you going to do? Come, let's wash together." The next day, before going to the Mo family, Jinwan first returned to the Ji home. After a night of indulgence, there was not a single part of Jinwan's body that did not feel sore. Even when she walked, her legs felt weak. "Why didn't you go to the Mo family with Jingshin?" Ji Hongwen asked when he saw Jinwan. Jinwan answered with a smile. "Some relatives who came back from abroad arrived in the wee hours of the morning. There wasn't a convenient car, so Jingshin went to the airport to pick them up. I didn't intend for him to deter half of Hai Cheng to come home to pick me up, so I came to go to the Mo home with you." The group boarded the car and prepared to set off. Before they set off, Jinwan suddenly said, "Wait for me in the car. My stomach isn't feeling well. I'll be right back." Ji Minggran and Shin Haru had already boarded the car. Their eyes were fixed on her figure. For some reason, they felt that Jinwan's motive for coming back so early in the morning was not so pure. However, they had already boarded the car, and there was no way for them to get off to check on the situation. Shin Haru sat in the car and could not help but say, "Nuan, wouldn't it be better to call the Mo family's chauffeur to pick her up? Taking such a long detour back to the Ji home, I really don't know what she's thinking." Ji Hongwen coldly glanced at her. "Even if Nuan is the Mo family's granddaughter-in-law, she's still my Ji Hongwen's daughter. Jingshin isn't by her side, so there's nothing wrong with her going with us." Several minutes later, Jinwan came out. She opened the door and entered the car. Her expression did not seem strange at all. Ji Minggran did not say a word as she sat in the back seat. However, she kept glancing at Jinwan's bag from time to time. Shin Haru glanced at her and did not notice anything strange. She then shifted her gaze away. The Mo family's old mansion was located under a mountain range with excellent feng shui in Haicheng. It occupied a large area and was located in the suburbs of Qingshan, which had the best air quality. Their car had just arrived when a slightly older figure walked out. It was the Mo family's butler, Uncle O. He came out with a smile. "Elder Mo is currently receiving guests inside and could not come out to welcome you. He specially sent me to invite you in." As he spoke, Uncle O glanced at Shin Haru, who was following behind Ji Hongwen. Thinking of the family behind Shin Haru, he could not help but smile. What a coincidence. The Qin family is also here today. It's rare to see people from the four main families of Hai Cheng appear at the same place. The four main families of Hai Cheng: the Mo family, the Qin family, the Ji family, and the Xing family. Before Xin Heru married Ji Hongwen, she had relied on the Xing family to survive because of her ex-husband, although she no longer had any connection with the Xing family. That's right. Ji Minggran suddenly interrupted in a low voice. But Auntie Xin is the only one who came today. I haven't seen Brother Sheng for a long time. Hearing the words Brother Sheng, Ji Hongwen's eyes turned cold, and Xin Heru suddenly looked a little uncomfortable. In silence, they all took a seemingly unintentional look at Jin Wan. Jin Wan raised her hand, her expression unchanged, and casually tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Uncle O, where is Grandfather Mo receiving guests? Let's go straight there. Uncle O led them inside. Wherever she passed by, the guests' attitudes toward Jin Wan were not very warm. In her previous life, Jin Wan had never been nice to these elders. If she suddenly took the initiative to greet them now, it would be too strange and the change in her character would be too abrupt, so she simply followed Uncle O quietly all the way. Uncle O led them into the banquet hall inside. At first glance, they saw Elder Mo, who was in high spirits although he was leaning on a cane. Hey, are you all here? Seeing them, Elder Mo turned and walked over. Grandfather, I wish you happiness as boundless as the East Sea and longevity as long as the South Mountain. Jin Wan rarely looked gentle and obedient. Jingshan has just picked up the guests from afar at the airport. I guess they will be here soon. When everyone is here, we will give you a good birthday. No hurry, no hurry. It's good that you are here. I'm happy to see you all together. Elder Mo was in a good mood because it was the first time that Jin Wan had called him grandfather so intimately. He thought of the phone call he made to the United States 2 nights ago and scolded his son for more than half an hour. Thinking about it, he felt it was worth it. Grandfather Mo, happy birthday. Suddenly, a soft voice came with a hint of gentleness and respect. Chapter 75. Although she did not expect it, it was not too sudden for her to come. Although Shuyan was only Mo Jingshan's secretary, she was friends with the Mo family. Right now, she was in the country and it was Elder Mo's 80th birthday. It was normal for her to come. Jin Wan immediately saw the exquisite gift box Shuyan was holding. And Shuyan was extremely beautiful. Her brows were soft, her facial features exquisite, and her aura elegant. Today she had dressed up meticulously. She was no longer wearing the simple attire she wore in the office. Instead, she was wearing a low-key, gentle dress that showed off her status. Her every frown and every smile was like the daughter of a wealthy family the elders spoke of. Elder Mo turned back. "Io, Shuyan is here so early? You've just returned not long ago. You should still be jet-lagged. It's a rare day off, so you should rest more. Why did you wake up so early?" And Shuyan acted as though she did not see Jin Wan, who was being tugged by Elder Mo's side. She only smiled and said, "It's fine. Mo usually takes good care of me. It won't be too tiring working by his side." As she spoke, it was as though her earlier words were unintentional. She smiled and handed over the gift box in her hands. This child, it's already not easy for her to come back to visit. Why did she bring a gift? Elder Mo smiled, excitedly reaching out to receive it. Shuyan has already grown so big? We're really old. Wasn't this child developing in America? Why did she suddenly return? Could it be that she specially came to celebrate Elder Mo's birthday? She's really thoughtful. When the elders of the Mo family entered the door and saw Shuyan, they directly approached her with smiles on their faces. At the same time, someone agreed, "That's right. Back then we all thought that Shuyan would become the Mo family's granddaughter-in-law. Who would have thought?" Before that person could finish speaking, he was slapped on the hand by his husband. He immediately shut his mouth and looked awkwardly toward Jin Wan. In an instant, everyone's gaze shifted toward Jin Wan. Jin Wan appeared as though she did not hear anything. She received the unopened gift box from the elder's hands and placed it on the shelf by the side. She turned back to say, "Everyone sit down and chat. I'll go cut some fruits for you." The surrounding people who were waiting to watch a good show were startled. They did not expect Jin Wan to take on the attitude of half a mistress of the Mo family without batting an eyelid. Even the opportunity for others to continue making sarcastic remarks had been blocked. And Shuyan saw that her unopened gift had already been placed on the display shelf at the side, buried under the other gifts. She was still smiling, and her eyes seemed to inadvertently look in the direction Jin Wan had left. This Jin Wan seemed to be different from the one she had heard before returning to the country. Jin Wan brought the freshly cut fruit out. Her words and actions were appropriate. The elders who were waiting to catch her could only glance at her. Due to the presence of the elder, most of them reluctantly gave her some face, but there were still some whose eyes were filled with obvious disdain. Girl, go outside and take a look. Has Jingshin returned? Elder Mo saw that almost all the guests had arrived and directly spoke to Jinwan. All right. Jinwan turned to leave. Right now, not only was Jinwan's actions impeccable, even the elder had clearly revealed her identity in front of everyone. Any unfriendly gazes were clearly seen by the elder. Jinwan walked to the courtyard where Elder Mo and the guests could not see her. She suddenly saw her aunt, Mo Pylon, standing in front of her. She was currently chatting and laughing with several middle-aged women around her age. She turned back to see Jinwan and coldly glared at her. Jinwan pretended not to see and walked out. Mo Pylon walked over and blocked her path. Yo, didn't you just arrive? Where are you going? Could it be that you were chased out? Without the elder's protection, I'm afraid you'll be crushed to death by the eyes of your relatives and friends, right? In this Mo family, there really aren't many who like you. Jinwan's expression did not change. Look at my eyes. I actually just saw Aunt. Why didn't you go in to sit? Instead, you're standing outside eating melon seeds? Mo Pylon's expression faltered. Before she could speak, she heard Jinwan leisurely say with a smile, I almost forgot. The Mo family has a rule. I'm afraid there isn't even a place for Aunt to sit in the guest hall. Inside are all the Mo family's direct relatives or important figures. As for you, you can only grab a handful of melon seeds and stand outside in the cold wind. Mo Pylon harshly glared at her. If it wasn't for Jingshin protecting you, do you think you can enter? Jinwan is the Mo family's official granddaughter-in-law. Even if others can't enter, she has to. All of a sudden, Mo Jingshin's voice came from behind Mo Pylon. Mo Pylon faltered. She turned to meet Mo Jingshin's clear and cold gaze. Mo Jingshin walked past her. Jinwan saw him approaching. He indeed possessed all the qualities that made him the center of attention. Since he did not need to go to the company today, Mo Jingshin was dressed casually. He wore a light-colored turtleneck sweater, straight trousers, and a beige windbreaker. He rarely wore warm colors. Today he was not dressed high and mighty, but it made him appear more realistic in front of Jinwan. His fashionable and low-profile clothes made his skin look slightly pale. Under the dazzling sunlight in the front yard of the Mo family's old mansion, it seemed to be hidden. Only a pair of deep, ink-like eyes and thin lips could be seen. They were so bright and beautiful that one could not shift their eyes away. Mo Jingshin had gone to the airport very early today. He had been picking up guests until now, but he didn't look tired at all. When he came up to Jinwan, his brows relaxed, his lips curved, and he adjusted the collar of her coat. Why aren't you inside? Why did you come out? Grandfather looked at the time and felt that you should be back soon. He asked me to come out and pick you up. Go in. Don't stand outside in the cold wind. Mo Jingshin put his arm around Jinwan's waist and walked back. He did not even give that so-called aunt a second glance. They entered the guest hall. Originally, it was bustling with various guests chatting in groups of 3 to 5. The elder was also speaking with several elders. The moment Mo Jingshin appeared, the hall suddenly became quieter. The moment they saw Jinwan, who was openly held by Mo Jingshin, walk through the door, the guests who had secretly ridiculed her when he was not around all fell silent. None of them dared to make a sound. As Mo Jingshin walked through the door, their expressions softened. The mockery turned into flattery, the mockery turned into smiles, and their cold gazes turned into warm gazes. Jinwan thought that the Mo family's relatives and friends were all elites who had been honed in the upper class. Even if these people had many tricks up their sleeves right now, they were all blocked by Mo Jingshin's sharp eyes. Chapter 76. Today, those who had the right to attend the Mo family home were all from the upper class of Haicheng and even the country. From the political and business circles to the media and entertainment circles, they had all sent representatives to attend. Although it was called a birthday banquet, it was more like a social test. Everyone's expression was a show of the ways of the world. Mo Pylon was unwilling to give up. She followed them in from outside the door. The moment she stepped in, she spoke, Miss G is really capable. You can coax our Jingshin into treating you like a precious jewel. You're so capable, yet you haven't returned to the Mo family in half a year after getting married. Why don't you continue to grow your skills and continue to be Mrs. Mo in the Yew Garden? Why did you come to the Mo family home? After all, you've never placed us old things in your eyes. Jinwan was about to speak up when Mo Jingshan pressed down on her in his arms. Jinwan's health isn't good. I was the one who arranged for her to rest more in the Yu Garden and go out less. It has nothing to do with Jinwan. Mo Jingshan spoke up to protect her. His attitude was cold and indifferent, not giving her any face at all. Mo Pylon rolled her eyes. The last time she brought her daughter to the Yu Garden, she did not receive any benefits. She could not take this lying down. Today it was not only Mo Jingshan and the elder who were present. No matter what, Mo Pylon had to teach Jinwan a lesson. Elder, quickly look. This is the first time Jingshan has brought his wife back after getting married, and he already has such an attitude. He completely doesn't place us elders in his eyes. If this continues, I'm afraid even you won't be able to compete with Jinwan's status. What Jinwan says is one and what she says is two. If Jinwan is unhappy and tells Jingshan not to return to the Mo family, I'm afraid he'll really cut off all ties with the Mo family. Pylon, you're already so old. Don't you know how to keep a lid on your words? Elder Mo furrowed his brows, his gaze impatient as he said, I asked them to set up their wedding house in the Yu Garden and not stay in the Mo family home. I wanted them to live peacefully. This half a year there hasn't been any major events at home. Jingshan is usually busy at the company. Why would they return to the Mo family? Stop stirring up trouble here. Mo Pylon's expression froze, and she had no choice but to change her expression. Although she had a smile on her face, she still continued to nitpick, how am I instigating? Elder, this Jinwan hasn't returned home even once since she got married. I'm just trying to talk to her from the perspective of an elder. Besides, our Jingshan is so good in all aspects. Why did he marry Jinwan? Aside from having an empty face, this Ji family's eldest daughter is not worthy of our Jingshan. After Mo Pylon finished speaking, she met Mo Jingshan's cold gaze and subconsciously turned to look at Elder Mo. However, she did not receive any good looks from him and could only shift her gaze to a corner to avoid feeling guilty from being stared at by Elder Mo. Oh, that's right. The words I said today also include the wishes of Jingshan's father. At this time she could only use Mo Jingshan's father to suppress Jinwan. Otherwise, Jinwan would really think that by relying on Mo Jingshan and the elder's support, she could do whatever she wanted in the Mo family. Not far away, and Shuyen, who was seated on the sofa, slightly raised her brows to look at Mo Jingshan. After Mo Jingshan entered, he did not even look in that direction. Everyone in the guest hall was watching Mo Pylon fearlessly charging into the muzzle of a gun. No one interrupted. However, Mo Jingshan's indifferent expression and Jinwan's moderate smile were like a mirror, reflecting Mo Pylon's sour expression that she couldn't eat. His father? Elder Mo stood up, slamming the walking stick in his hand heavily against the ground. He sternly said, I'm his father's old man. This old man hasn't said anything yet. How can it be his father's turn to speak? Mo Pylon's expression faltered. She did not expect Elder Mo's temper to be so sudden. I'm saying, grandfather, it's fine. Auntie is after all an elder. It's not a big deal for her to scold me. Previously, I didn't return to the Mo family to show my filial piety. It's indeed my fault. Jinwan spoke up, her lips carrying a suitable smile. Mo Jingshan mildly curved his lips, helping her block Mo Pylon's following words. Auntie, Nwan's stomach may already be pregnant with the Mo family's great-grandson. Don't scare her. After speaking under everyone's shocked gazes, he held Jinwan, who was slightly stunned, and sat on the leather sofa by the side. His actions and words were naturally protective. There was not a single part that did not show how important Jinwan was to Mo Jingshan. It also showed that Jinwan was not just carrying the title of Mrs. Mo Jingshan really doted on her and cared about her very much. What did you say earlier? Elder Mo appeared as though he had just woken up from a dream. Right now, he could not care less about Mo Pylon's twisted expression and directly glanced at Jinwan's stomach. Mo Jingshan's gaze was cold and calm. Jinwan suffered a cold when she was young. Her body is slightly weak. Even if she wants to be pregnant, she still needs a period of time to recuperate. In the past half a year, I've been letting her rest in the Yu Garden and reduce her movements. I didn't expect that such a small family matter would be an eyesore to Auntie's eyes. The elder approached step by step with his walking stick. Looking at Jinwan, he could not close his mouth from smiling. This child, if your body is weak, just say so. It's fine if your body is weak. With Jingshan around, after a period of recuperation, you'll definitely be able to give birth to a healthy baby. Don't worry, in the future, grandfather will look after you. Don't care about any rumors. Take good care of yourself. If you're already pregnant, that would be even better. But you still have to take care of your own body. Grandfather's body is still strong. I can wait. As he spoke, the elder turned back to glare at Mo Pylon. Jinwan has been preparing for pregnancy and has been recuperating at home. In the end, look at what you've said. You're already so old, but you only know how to stir up trouble all day long. Mo Pylon was somewhat embarrassed. She pulled a long face, but she did not dare to casually mock and speculate about the matter of the Mo family's great-grandson. After all, this was the elder's bottom line. If she crossed the bottom line, it was likely that she would not be able to enter the Mo family's door in the future. On the other side, Jinwan quietly glanced at the man beside her from time to time. Preparing for pregnancy? Mo Jingshan was indeed very black-bellied. With just these 2 words, he was enough to block out all the words against her. After all, her position as Mrs. Mo was stable. Now that the matter of preparing for pregnancy was involved, no one dared to offend her, for fear that if they made her unhappy and caused any problems to the Mo family's great-grandson, they would be directly beaten into the 18th level of hell by Elder Mo with his walking stick. But, the matter of preparing for pregnancy, with so many people watching, Jinwan did not know where to put her hand. Should she put it on her belly for show? Or should she and Mo Jingshan sat on the sofa. The man's hand held hers again. Their hands intertwined naturally, and he placed them on his lap, finally giving her the most suitable place to put her hand. Chapter 77. By the afternoon, more than half of the guests had left. The official birthday banquet would begin in the evening. The Mo family did not continue to receive guests from outside. Those who stayed in the guest hall were the immediate family members of the Mo family, or relatives and friends who were very close to them in terms of social status. Grandfather Mo, I didn't have the chance to speak earlier. This is the gift our Ji family has prepared for you. Ji Minggran stood by the table and took out an exquisite antique box. When she said this, she intentionally glanced at Jinwan. Jinwan sensed her gaze but did not react. When the relatives at the table saw that someone had started this again, all kinds of special gifts were placed on the table one by one. This time they were no longer casually stacked on the gift racks. Instead, they took the initiative to open the gifts and show them to the old man as if they were presenting treasures. Ji Minggran saw that the time was right. She abruptly opened her mouth. Big sister, why haven't I seen your birthday gift? Quickly take it out for Grandfather Mo to see. I dare to believe that your birthday gift will definitely be very special. As she spoke, she winked at Jinwan. She smiled brightly, appearing innocent. It is indeed special. After all, it wasn't easy to obtain. Jinwan took out the red sandalwood box that she could not tell what was inside and placed it on the table. Seeing that the size of the box was the same as the chessboard that Ji Minggran had previously given her, Ji Minggran's eyes revealed a hint of excitement. When Ji Hongwen saw the box that Jinwan took out, his brows imperceptibly furrowed. Grandfather, this is a surprise for you. I believe you will definitely like it. Jinwan placed the box in front of Elder Mo's eyes, her smile sincere. Elder Mo was smiling. Before he could speak, Ji Minggran suddenly stared at the red sandalwood box. She spoke with a shocked expression. It can't be, big sister. This is the birthday gift you want to give to Grandfather Mo? Jinwan was unruffled. What is it? Ji Minggran maintained her shocked expression. Looking at the size of the box, what is inside? Could it be our family's early Tang chessboard? A few days ago, Dad lost his most beloved antique. I didn't expect you to secretly take it away. Sis, I know you want to please Grandpa Mo, but you can't steal Dad's most treasured antique to present Buddha with borrowed flowers. At this moment, Ji Hongwen could barely sit still. My little daughter has a loose tongue. Elder Mo, please don't take offense. Wan would definitely not do such a thing. As for this jade chessboard. Shin Haru suddenly spoke up from the side. I was just saying that a few days ago, I felt that something was missing from the antique shelf in your study. I didn't expect that Jinwan had actually secretly taken it away. As she said that, Shin Haru shook her head and sighed. Although Wan wanted to give something good to Elder Mo with good intentions, after all, a married daughter is like spilled water. When she returned to her maternal family, she didn't even inform them before taking away such a valuable antique. Although this can't be considered stealing, it is indeed against the rules. Shut up. Because the Mo family was present, Ji Hongwen did not fly into a rage. Instead, he kicked Shin Haru harshly under the table, warning her not to speak carelessly. Shin Haru did not make a sound, but her gaze subtly shifted toward Jinwan. She did not believe that Jin Wan would have the ability to clear her name with the evidence and witnesses present. After all, neither her maternal family nor in-laws' family could prove her innocence. Although this matter was not big, it was not small either. In the eyes of the two families, even if Jin Wan's tongue was rotten, it would be useless. Jin Wan maintained her calm smile. What chessboard? Menggran and Auntie Shen, why can't I understand a single word you're saying? It was truly an unexpected gain. This matter was actually not caused by Ji Menggran alone. She was still wondering how the chessboard could be taken out so easily. It seemed like Shin Haru had helped her from behind the scenes. It was truly a flawless show. If it was the Jin Wan from her previous life who did not have her guard up against Ji Menggran, she would most likely be wronged to death. Even if Elder Mo suppressed this matter and helped her smooth things over, there would still be scolding behind her back. She would be mocked and ridiculed by her friends and family for the rest of her life. Big sister, don't play dumb. The chessboard is right inside. You can't possibly take back the gift that has already been delivered to Grandfather Mo. Ji Menggran raised her voice. Jin Wan glanced at her, an undetectable cold smile hidden in her eyes. Menggran, why are your words so strange today? Big sister, I'm doing this for your own good. Stop acting. You stole this jade chessboard from the early Tang dynasty and gifted it to Grandfather Mo. Even if Dad doesn't hold it against you now, this chessboard cannot be used as a birthday gift. Ji Menggran spoke while sighing. This chessboard belonged to a eunuch who caused chaos in the court during the early Tang dynasty. That eunuch was later sentenced to death by 1,000 cuts because of his conspiracy. After his death, his corpse was buried by his trusted aides. At the same time, this chessboard was buried with him. This was an item buried with him. Even if it is an expensive antique that is worth collecting, this kind of thing definitely cannot be used as a birthday gift. Ji Menggran's voice became softer and softer. It was as though she did not intend to say all this, but her voice was just loud enough for everyone to hear. Gifting this kind of thing, big sister, what are your intentions? Menggran. Ji Hongwen had originally planned to admit to her mistake after his initial shock. However, he did not expect Ji Menggran to actually say such a thing out loud. He immediately wanted to slap her to death. Ji Menggran had already spoken and could not take it back. She looked at Jin Wan fearlessly. However, she did not see any signs of shock, panic, or even fear on Jin Wan's face. She had finally found an opportunity to cause Jin Wan to lose her footing in the Mo family. She could not let it go so easily. All the relatives and friends present had differing gazes. However, because Elder Mo maintained a cold expression and did not speak, no one dared to casually slander her. However, in such a matter, even if the elder wanted to protect Jin Wan, he most likely would not be able to do so, right? On the elder's 80th birthday, she gifted a Tang dynasty eunuch as a burial item. Furthermore, it was a eunuch who died a horrible death by 1,000 cuts. This was simply unreasonable. Mo Jingshan sat by the side with an indifferent expression. Only when the show was almost over did he coldly sneer. Ji Menggran saw that Mo Jingshan did not immediately speak up to protect Jin Wan. She guessed that he also felt that Jin Wan had gone overboard with this matter. She then said, Brother Jingshan, I didn't mean to say such words in such a situation. Compared to my big sister's face, Grandfather Mo's health is more important. Gifting such an item is really not good. That's why Mo Jingshan's eyes carried a slight smile. He did not look at Ji Menggran but calmly glanced at the unopened red sandalwood gift box in front of Elder Mo. Chapter 78. Ji Menggran's expression stiffened. Because of Mo Jingshan's nonchalant words, all her efforts were immediately put on the table. She bit her tongue, turning to Shin Haru for help. However, Shin Haru did not look at her, only sitting by Ji Hongwen's side as though this matter did not concern her. Back then they had agreed not to drag her into this. Ji Menggran's chest felt stifled, but she could only endure it. She stared at the gift box. After all, with this thing here, Jin Wan would not be able to escape responsibility. From what I see, we should hurry and open the gift box to take a look. Ji Menggran insisted. Jin Wan smiled, calmly reaching out. However, the moment her hand touched the gift box, she suddenly received Elder Mo's gaze. The elder could tell that Jin Wan had fallen for his trap. To prevent her from being put on the spot, he used his gaze to warn her not to open the gift box. If it really was that thing, not only would he feel unlucky but many of the famous people present were also superstitious. If it really was what Ji Menggran said, Jin Wan really would not be able to find a way out. Jin Wan gave the elder a reassuring smile. Her hand gently pressed against the box, and the expensive red sandalwood gift box was instantly opened. The moment she saw the item placed neatly in the center, Ji Menggran, who had just stood up due to her agitation, immediately trembled. How was this possible? She had clearly handed it to Jinwan earlier, but it was not. Seeing the item in the box, Ji Hongwen, who was by the side, immediately released a sigh of relief. However, he immediately furrowed his brows, coldly glancing at the petrified Ji Menggran. This brat was courting death. She had really thrown away the Ji family's face. Grandfather, this is just a farce. I've let you watch a joke. Jinwan smiled leisurely. When Jing Shen and I went to buy a gift, Jing Shen said that you have a preference for ancient chess. This ancient chess manual was left behind by the famous Gu Shiyan during the late Tang dynasty. It has been passed down from generation to generation and was carefully treasured by the imperial palaces. Even now it is still well preserved. I hope you will like it. Elder Mo was stunned for a moment as though he could not believe it. When he returned to his senses, he happily reached out to receive it. He opened it and flipped through it, happily nodding his head. You, this child, are really thoughtful. This is indeed something that I've always wanted to collect but could not obtain. I never thought that I would be able to obtain it before I was born. Mo Jingshan raised his hand and gently pressed down, gesturing for Jinwan, who had been standing by the table, to sit down. When he spoke, his voice was the same as before. Nuan specially requested the chess record for you. It took her a lot of effort. The old master nodded happily. He couldn't take his eyes off the chess record in his hand. He kept looking at it carefully page by page. Obviously he treasured it very much. Jinwan quietly held Mo Jingshan's hand under the table, whispering, You clearly won it. How can you say that I begged for it? Mo Jingshan's voice was low but gentle and clear. My body is yours. The things I win, of course, are also yours. Jinwan, it was as if he had been flirted with again. Sitting across the table, Ji Mingran's face had already turned pale. She was flustered and wanted to say that Jinwan was clearly holding the chessboard, but now she was being stared at by all sorts of gazes. Her father was also giving her a warning look. She raised her eyes to look at Jinwan. For a moment she did not know how to smooth things over. What should she do now? The people seated were all very astute. Everyone could tell that she had purposely dragged Jinwan into the water earlier. How could she explain herself in a reasonable manner? It seemed like no explanation would make sense. Menggran? Jinwan's voice suddenly came. It carried a hint of coldness, and she had called out to her in front of everyone. Ji Menggran abruptly raised her eyes. Right now she was both afraid and hateful. The fear in her eyes could not be hidden. Jinwan's tone dragged out slowly, but it carried a hint of coldness that could not be ignored. I'm afraid there must be some misunderstanding between us. This is also your first time at the Mo family home. Why don't you follow me to the backyard for a walk? Let's have a chat? Ji Mingran's face paled. After so long, she already knew that Jinwan was no longer the same person who would allow herself to mess around. Aside from the Ji and Mo families, there were also many famous people present. She had really suffered a huge loss. Ji Menggran lowered her head and did not speak. However, she did not plan to follow her. Ji Hongwen angrily said, Why aren't you leaving with your sister? Do you want to continue arguing in front of so many people? Your sister has already given you enough face. Elder Mo also abruptly said, Indeed, I think there seems to be some misunderstanding between you sisters. This is the first time this old man has seen a younger sister frame her older sister in front of everyone. If you have anything to say, go to the back and speak. Ji Mingran's expression became even more flustered. Her eyes flickered, not daring to look at them or Jinwan. From the start, Jinwan did not plan to completely fall out with Ji Menggran so quickly. Firstly, she had not found a suitable opportunity. Secondly, she wanted to use this opportunity to clearly understand Ji Mingran's methods. However, right now, this opportunity was extremely suitable. Since Ji Menggran did not wish to have a good life, she could not blame her for being impolite. Ji Menggran followed Jinwan out of the banquet hall. Jinwan did not speak along the way. Ji Menggran followed behind, her heart secretly beating like a drum. When they reached a place in the Mo family's backyard where there were fewer people, Jinwan turned around. At the same time, Ji Menggran raised her head to stare at her. She seized the opportunity to speak first. Sister, I'll be frank with you. Today's matter was indeed intentional. However, it was also because previously you, Pa. An extremely loud slap rang out. It was crisp and sudden, causing the helpers passing by to jump in fright. Ji Minggran was so shocked that she could not even maintain an expression. She did not dare to believe that Jinwan had actually slapped her. What was even more unbelievable was that the person who slapped her was the Jinwan who had always given in to her and doted on her since she was young. Ji Minggran raised her hand to cover her face. She was so shocked that the muscles on her face froze. After a long while she screamed in disbelief, "Jinwan! You actually slapped me, pa!" Another clean and ruthless slap flew over, causing Ji Minggran's face to turn to the side. Jinwan's icy voice carried a frosty coldness. "I slapped you. Shameless, shameless and endlessly seeking death." Ji Minggran screamed in anger, "Jinwan!" She had never been slapped by anyone in her entire life. However, she was actually slapped by Jinwan. She was even slapped twice. Ji Minggran was so angry that her entire body was trembling. "Jinwan, what I hate the most is your self-righteous arrogance. Why do you always have to stand on top of me? Why can you?" Jinwan coldly smiled, raising her hand to slap her again. Ji Minggran did not expect there to be a third slap. She was slapped silly and her entire face froze in place. Chapter 79. Because I'm your older sister. Because everything I've obtained is fair and above board. No matter how arrogant and conceited I was, I've never schemed against my own family or even thought about my own sister's husband. Ji Minggran, this is called being shameless. Jinwan did not hesitate in the slightest. She did not give her any face. Ji Minggran was stunned. In the next moment she was so angry that her entire body was trembling. She did not expect Jinwan to know everything. So, everything she did, Jinwan saw it all? She deliberately beat her at her own game? Was that why the tables had turned so suddenly today? Ji Minggran suddenly felt afraid. She held on to her reddened face and sobbed weakly, I didn't think much of it. I just couldn't stand the way you treated brother Jingshin in the past. I feel that you've let him down and let him down. That's why All of a sudden Ji Hongwen walked out. Clearly he had heard their conversation earlier. Jinwan saw him and expressionlessly walked to his side. Dad, you handle this. Finishing her words, she walked out of the backyard without turning back. Ji Minggran turned back to see Ji Hongwen's heavy expression. She was so frightened that her face turned pale. Dad? Ji Hongwen did not speak. The moment Jinwan walked away with her back facing them with a pa sound, he raised his hand and sent a slap toward Ji Minggran's face. Ji Minggran was caught off guard and was slapped to the ground. She raised her head, looking at the furious Ji Hongwen in fear. A chill of fear spread from her limbs and spread throughout her body. What you said earlier, was it all true? Ji Hongwen furrowed his brows. Ji Minggran looked at him, crying. That. I really just felt that older sister isn't worthy of brother Jingshin and felt unfair for him. I can explain what happened today. Stupid. Ji Hongwen's eyes were filled with anger. How could I have a daughter like you? After so many years, I've seen many grudges between rich families, but I didn't expect my own daughter to do such a lowly thing. Ji Minggran looked at Ji Hongwen's expression, not daring to say a single word. Her entire face was pale to the point of being transparent. The guests at the banquet had already forgotten about the little episode just now, and the congratulatory words of birthday came one after another in the guest hall. Elder Mo responded with a smile and carefully placed the chess record that he had been holding in his hands like a treasure into the red sandalwood box. At the same time he called for Mo Jingshin to sit by his side. The grandfather and grandson sat together. Mo Jingshin's smile remained mild. After all, Elder Mo had seen everything that had happened earlier. Does that Ji Minggran have feelings for you? Elder Mo spoke in a low voice that only Mo Jingshin could hear. I understand the Ji family's situation. Ji Hongwen is a good person, but these two daughters lost their mother a long time ago. Now the Ji family's second daughter is so hostile toward Jinwan. In my opinion, you should let Jinwan go home less in the future. When you're free, bring her here more often. This old man doesn't have any other abilities, but I do have the ability to protect my granddaughter-in-law. Mo Jingshin smiled. All right. Coincidentally, Jinwan returned at this moment. The moment she entered the guest hall, she saw Mo Jingshin sitting by grandfather Mo's side in a filial and considerate manner. His face carried a rare warmth and patience. Her heart trembled slightly. Mo Jingshin's tall figure lazily leaned against the back of grandfather Mo's chair. The lights in the guest hall shone through the antique decorations, illuminating half of the man's face. It was cold and noble like the clear grass and trees on a foggy day. However, it seemed as though the sunlight had penetrated through it, adding a touch of warmth that was approachable and approachable. Jinwan accidentally fell into a trance. The people present were all elites of the upper class and important figures of various circles. They all had extraordinary statuses and unique auras. Everyone's presence could not be ignored. But even in such an occasion, Mo Jingshan was still the one who attracted the most attention. Regardless of whether it was his self-restraint or his every movement, he was always the center of attention. "Jibrat, you're back." Grandfather Mo saw her and raised his hand to beckon her over. "What are you standing there for? Come, sit by grandfather's side." Jinwan walked over. Originally, she wanted to go to the other side of grandfather Mo, but for some strange reason she went to Mo Jingshan's side and sat by his side. Of course, she was not deliberately showing off her affection, but earlier, it was her instinct. Her feet did not listen to her and she moved closer to his side. Grandfather Mo saw all of this and smiled in a good mood. Taking the opportunity when a rich madam by the side leaned over to casually chat with Jinwan, he softly said to Mo Jingshan, "Previously you said that you're preparing for pregnancy. Is it true?" Mo Jingshan chuckled softly. "What do you think?" "TSK, what do you mean by, I think? I can see that the G family's girl is sincere toward you. Since the relationship between husband and wife is harmonious, you should take this opportunity to nurse her body back to health and give birth to the child as soon as possible. This way, this old man will be busy coaxing the child and won't have the time to worry about other things." Jinwan vaguely heard Grandfather Mo's words and turned her gaze over. However, the first thing she met was Mo Jingshan's gaze. Originally, she was slightly embarrassed by the topic of preparing for pregnancy. The moment she met Mo Jingshan's gaze, she saw his gaze that was as deep as the ocean. She felt that he really planned on agreeing to the elder just like that. The guests gradually dispersed. It was no longer early. Mo Jingshan was the eldest grandson of the Mo family. It was unavoidable that he drank a few cups of sake. Originally he planned on driving home, but he decided against it. Grandfather Mo asked him to stay the night in the Mo family's old residence. After they got married, Jinwan had not stayed in the Mo family home. It was only today that she found out that Mo Jingshan rarely came back to stay, but here, his room was cleaned every day. Although the Mo family's old residence was called an old residence, most of the buildings in the house were not old. Only the front three-story building with a simple front hall was somewhat old. However, the elder cherished the past and did not rebuild it. The few villas and pavilions at the back were all very beautiful. They were situated at the foot of the mountain range. It was said that the building closest to the mountain had a spring that was discovered several decades ago. However, outsiders were rarely allowed to soak in the hot spring. Only the Mo family had the right to do so. This place was situated at the foot of the mountain and had the fresh air. Furthermore, it was blessed with the peace and health that was hard to come by in the city center. In the middle of the house was a multi-story villa. The entire third floor belonged to Mo Jingshan. Chapter 80. In the dead of night. Jinwan could not find a hairdryer in the bathroom and came out with a towel wrapped around her hair. The moment she walked out, she saw that Mo Jingshan had just entered. He carried with him the chilly air of the autumn night and the fresh scent of the Mo family's old residence. Under the light, his expression was gentle. When he saw how she looked when she came out of the shower, his gaze deepened. By this time all the guests had already left. There was no need for Mo Jingshan to continue staying in the guest hall. When her father and Auntie Shen left, although their expressions were not as happy as the others, they still brought Ji Mingran into the car. At that time, Jinwan did not look at Ji Mingran's expression. From the corner of her eye, she could see that she was slightly disheveled. She did not even dare to greet her before entering the car and closing the door. Today, regarding the matter of grandfather's birthday gift, although I was not the one who suffered a loss, there were so many guests present. Earlier, when you sent them off, many of them must have mentioned this matter to you, right? Jinwan asked. Mo Jingshan lowered his head to glance at her. Today the people who stayed behind all knew how to write the word, propriety. Although they mentioned it earlier, once they stepped out of the Mo family's door, no one dared to say a single word to outsiders. Jinwan was startled. Ah, did you say something to them when I wasn't around? Don't worry about them. I'll deal with it. Mo Jingshan was unperturbed. You did well today. You killed the chicken to warn the monkey. In the future, those who are secretly against you will not dare to do anything to you. Be Mrs. Mo in peace. I'll handle everything. Oh, then what did grandfather say? Of course he'll side with you. Although grandfather is old, he sees things very clearly. That's good. I don't mind leaving a bad impression in other people's eyes. But with Ji Mingran's actions today, although she did not receive any benefits, it can be considered a small farce. No matter how you look at it, it won't be good. Mo Jingshan's gaze was dark as he watched her. Grandfather will never let you suffer a loss in the Mo family. Tonight, there will definitely be someone who won't be able to sleep, but that person will definitely not be you. Jin Wan instantly felt as though she had eaten her fill. She pursed her lips. Regarding today's matter, my dad must be extremely angry. Both the palm of his hand and the back of his hand are meat. Both sides are his daughter. Mo Jingshan's voice was low and heavy, calm as usual. Do you think he didn't notice that Ji Mingran's actions weren't normal? It's just that he didn't want to say it out of respect for his daughter. In today's situation, he was also forced to this step by his second daughter. You didn't do anything wrong, don't take it to heart. Oh. Jin Wan raised her hand to hold up the towel that was about to fall off her head. She wiped her wet hair with the towel and paused for a moment before asking, "What about you? If I really fell for it today and lost all my face, what would you do?" Mo Jingshan lowered his gaze to look at the little woman who had just showered. Her face was still slightly damp, and he reached out to pinch her chin. You still have Shin Haru in front of you. Letting her off today is on account of the Sheng family and the Ji family. But if she really wants to push you into an unbearable situation, I don't mind using her severed son to threaten her. Let's see if it's more important to be at odds with you or her son's life and future. The man's voice was low and mild, but Jin Wan's heart was completely at ease. On the importance of having a good husband. Right now, she completely understood that Mo Jingshan would only do one thing, and that was to give Jin Wan a sense of security that no one could replace. No matter what, he would definitely be able to help her solve any problem. Even if she was careless and fell for someone else's scheme, he would not give her a chance to lose. The next day, in order to merge her two small real estate companies into a large studio, Jin Wan sorted out the financial and project information. She was so busy that she forgot to eat and sleep. It was already past 10 o'clock in the evening, but Mo Jingshan had yet to return. Jin Wan stretched lazily and picked up her phone to check the time. She saw 2 missed calls from Xia Tian. She had been busy earlier and had a 2-hour video conference with the studio. She had switched her phone to silent mode. Jin Wan dialed Xia Tian's number, and the call was quickly connected. Xia Tian's voice was ambiguous. Wan, did your husband tie you to the bed? He's finally willing to let you take time to look at your phone? Jin Wan pursed her lips. Mo Jingshan should be busy tonight. He hasn't returned yet. He's not home? Then why did you take so long to call? I thought you and Mo Jingshan would have sex every night, doing all kinds of positions. Jin Wan turned to sit by the bed, picking up a pillow and hugging it in her arms. Can you stop thinking about such things? An unmarried man is even more ferocious than a married man like me. Xia Tian chuckled, sitting on the bed and taking a bite of watermelon. Jin Wan had not had time to go to the hospital recently. She asked tentatively, "Recently you've been so quiet. You haven't even called me a few times. Is someone accompanying you?" Xia Tian stuffed a lot of watermelon into her mouth. Her tone was muffled. "How did you know?" Jin Wan's heart sank. "The man who knocked you earlier, is he chasing you?" Xia Tian almost choked on the watermelon. She coughed several times before cursing hoarsely. "What the heck, do you know how to calculate? I haven't seen you for a few days and you've become a half-immortal?" Jin Wan's expression turned cold. As expected, Xia Tian's half-concealed and slightly bashful tone was very familiar to her. Everything was as she had expected. It was just that she hadn't visited him for a period of time, but that bastard still managed to take advantage of her. The next morning before 7 o'clock, Jin Wan directly drove to the hospital. She had just stepped out of the elevator and had yet to reach the door when she saw Xia Tian being supported by a tall and thin man from the public bathroom. Xia Tian raised her eyes to see Jin Wan. She was immediately shocked. Wan? Jin Wan did not say a word. Her gaze coldly swept past the man's face. She pushed open the door and walked in. Only when Xia Tian was supported in and sat on the bed did the tall man turn to look at Jin Wan. He reached out a hand to her and said politely, "You're the good friend Jin Wan that Tian often talks about? Hello, nice to meet you. My name is Li Minjian." Jin Wan appeared not to have heard him. She sat on the sofa by the side of the ward, expressionless. She was unprecedentedly cold. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.